Imagine a person who weighs like an adult reindeer. As for their height, it is almost like two adults stacked one on the other. This is exactly what Robert Pershing Wadlow looked like. This American dude was the tallest person ever recorded, standing at a whopping 8 foot 11.1 inches tall and weighing 439 pounds. Growing up, Wadlow was always the tallest kid in the room. At the age of 8, he was already as tall as his dad. And at the age of 9, he was strong and big enough to carry his own father. By the time he graduated high school, he had already grown to be 8 foot 4 inches tall. As for job prospects, he intended to become a lawyer, and he even enrolled in college. But his height let him have a few side hustles. First, circus performers that made him a celebrity in no time. Second, in 1938, he kicked off a promo tour with the International Shoe Company, snagging free shoes along the way. Wadlow wasn't about that freak show life. He saw himself as a walking ad for the company. Because of his huge stature, he needed to wear special braces on his legs to help him walk. He never used a wheelchair, but walking was definitely a big struggle for him. Sadly, an infection from a faulty brace led to his untimely demise in 1940. His coffin was so huge that it took 12 pallbearers and 8 assistants to carry it. To this day, a life-size statue of Wadlow stands tall in Alton, his hometown. Throughout his short life, and Robert only lived 22 years, he never stopped growing. Each year, he would get an extra few inches to his gigantic height. When he was 21 years old, he passed John Rogan in terms of height, and that was the guy who had been recorded as the tallest guy ever before Robert came into play. Rob's predecessor, John Bud Rogan, born in Tennessee, was known as the tallest non-mobile person ever, measuring 8 feet 9 inches. His rapid growth started at 13 years old due to gigantism, leading to joint stiffness. Despite his condition preventing physical labor, Rogan made a living selling portraits and postcards. He declined offers to join carnivals and sideshows, preferring to maintain his independence. Rogan used a goat-pulled cart as a wheelchair. He was known for his deep voice and playful demeanor. Unlike Robert Wadlow, John Rogan didn't boast a reindeer-like weight. On the contrary, he only weighed 174 pounds, which is 2.5 times less than Robert. Zhang Jinlian from China rocked the world by becoming the tallest woman ever recorded in modern times. Despite her parents and siblings being of average height, she had a gene for towering greatness, but her stature was the result of a condition. The thing is, a tumor messed with her hormones and made her shoot up in height. By age 13, she had already been taller than the tallest guy of the same age. Zhang managed to graduate even with all the attention her height brought. People came from far and wide to meet her and gawk at her impressive stature. Even though doctors suggested surgery to remove the tumor causing her rapid growth, Zhang decided to keep it. She didn't want to lose her hair. She was quite the foodie too, eating tons of dumplings and rice each day to fuel her body. Sadly, health issues caught up with her, and she passed away in 1982. Her height was recorded as 8 feet 2 inches. She beat out Jane Bunford for the title of the tallest woman to ever walk the earth, and even had a moment as the tallest person alive from 1981 to 1982. By the way, Jane Bunford was the tallest recognized British person known to date. At a height of 7 feet 11 inches, she definitely stood out in a crowd. Born in Birmingham in 1895, Jane was an average Jane until 11 years old. At that age, she had an accident that changed her life forever. A head injury damaged her pituitary gland, causing an excess of growth hormone to send her height skyrocketing. Due to discomfort caused by her gigantic size, she had to drop out of school. Although she had opportunities to profit from her unique stature, Jane chose to live a quiet life. In her final years, she became a recluse due to the unwanted attention her height brought. Battling joint issues and a severe spinal curvature, Jane passed away at the age of 26. Hey, I have a quick question for you. Is height something that can change or not? It seems like we actually do get a little taller during the day and shrink back down at night. Let's thank gravity for this. But there was this one crazy case where a guy named Adam Rayner was super short at 21, only 3 feet and 10.5 inches. But then, he suddenly started growing like crazy. By the time he was 32, he was 7 feet 1.75 inches tall. Unfortunately, all that growth happened so fast that he ended up bedridden for life and didn't become a basketball star. Socks can be a real hassle for tall people. Don Kohler, who wore size 22 shoes, once said his biggest clothing issue was finding socks that fit. Luckily, he found a company in Pennsylvania that made custom socks for him. Don was really tall, one of only 24 people in history to reach over 8 feet tall. He was known as the world's tallest man from 1969 until he passed away in 1981, having grown to 8 feet 2 inches. He had a condition called gigantism, which made him grow abnormally, starting from the age of 10. Don was born in Denton, Montana, to parents who were taller than average. He had a twin sister, but she was 5 feet 9 inches. It was a record-breaking height difference of 2 foot 5 in between twins, as recognized by the Guinness World Records. Don worked as a salesman for 25 years using his height as an advantage when meeting with customers. If you too wear a larger shoe size, you know how frustrating trying to find the perfect pair can be. Treintje Kiever from the Netherlands definitely understood the struggle. Born in 1616, she is rumored to be the tallest woman in history, standing at 9 Amsterdam feet. Sadly, she passed away at just 17 years old. Her original shoes, which were over 14 inches in length, European size 54 or American size 22, are still on display. Her parents even took her to carnivals to make money by showing her off. Treintje first gained attention when she was 9 years old. At that time, she was already 6 foot 7 inches tall. A royal group, including the Bohemian king and his family, visited her in The Hague, curious about the 9-year-old girl taller than every man in Europe. The Netherlands is home to some seriously tall folks, with the average height of its residents being 6 feet. The US may have produced some behemoths in the past, but the current titles for the tallest man and woman are held by Turkey. Meet Rumeysa Gelgi, Turkey's towering treasure and Guinness World Records queen. At 24, this 7-foot-tall lady is not just the tallest woman alive, but also a front-end web developer, crime novel enthusiast, and swimming pro. Overcoming challenges with Weaver syndrome, she's a fighter and a voice for rare conditions. As of 2024, Sultan Qasim is the world's tallest living man. Back in 2009, he shot to fame when he was measured by the Guinness World Records. He was 8 feet 1 inches tall. Can you believe that? Only a handful of people in history have ever reached that height. This Turkish farmer didn't start sprouting up until he was 10 years old. And get this, everyone in his family is of average height except for him. He has a condition called pituitary gigantism. Being super tall definitely has its pros and cons for Sultan. He could easily help his mom with household tasks, but shopping for clothes and squeezing into a regular-sized car can be a real challenge. And playing professional basketball? Not in the cards, as he's just too tall for the courts. Sultan also holds the record for the largest hands on a living person.
Uh-oh, they're here! You grab your things and head out to the jeeps that will take you to the evacuation center in the underground settlement. Your dog follows you, not knowing what's going on. You're outside, and you can see the giants miles away, walking towards you. There's so many of them, each as tall as the Statue of Liberty. But the leader is slightly taller than the Empire State Building. Each giant has a unique face, similar to a human's, but they're always showing their teeth and popping their eyes open. Everyone in the street is running towards the large jeeps. The vehicles are ready to take people away, but you're lagging way behind. Each giant step is more than 100 feet, so you hurry as fast as you can. You've almost reached the jeeps when they take off without you. The town is deserted now, so you run toward the nearest house and hide in the basement. The leader of the giants lets out a roar that shakes the entire neighborhood. You run downstairs and scrub yourself with oil and detergent. These giants have an extremely acute sense of smell. You clutch your dog to your chest and wait it out. Your heart is racing, and you're drenched in sweat. With each step the giants take, the ground shakes more and more. It means the giants are only several miles away. A few seconds later, they stop. You're still not moving, but you need to know what's happening. As soon as you get up, one of the giants rips the house open and exposes you to all of them. They're looking at you as if you're the last cookie on the counter that they all want to eat. You are frozen to the spot, trying not to make any sudden moves. Your dog starts barking at them. You make a run for it, while one of the giants reaches down and tries to grab you. Others want to catch you too, but their hands collide, giving you a chance to make a break for it. You find a motorcycle on the road and drive away as fast as you can. The giants hear you and set off on a chase. It's a good thing these roads don't have any obstacles. Whoa! One of the giants jumps over you and lands at the side of the road. They're right behind you, and the one in the front has its mouth open, ready to swallow you whole. You drive off the road and head for the forest. The trees are only knee-high for these giants, but at least they won't be able to see you so easily. The forest is dark and not suited for a motorcycle to move around. You're zigzagging between the trees, but suddenly your bike collides with a large rock and you get tossed into the river along with your dog. The motorcycle explodes, which draws the attention of the giants, but you're already getting washed down the raging river. Not too long after, you manage to swim to the riverbank and catch a breath. It's now nighttime, and you quickly set up camp. You can see the giants in the distance, wandering around like zombies. Some seem to sleep standing up. Hidden in a small cave, you start a campfire and cook some yummy fish. It's quiet around. You're miles away from the giants and hidden inside the cave. And still, the tallest one spots you and lets out a shriek that shakes the entire forest. The rest of the giants wake up and start running towards you. You quickly put out the fire and dash toward the densest part of the forest. Luckily, the giants are far enough for you to find an abandoned shack. There you see a motor scooter, and miraculously, it works. You start it up and swoosh away. You drive back to the main road, but the giants spot you and start chasing you. Your dog, meanwhile, is doing its job, barking at the monsters to scare them away, but it's definitely not working. In front of you, there's a tunnel through the mountains. It leads to another city. The giants stomp around and destroy everything in their path. Their glaring eyes shine like headlights in the dark. You manage to drive all the way through the dark tunnel. In front of you, there are cars crushed and thrown around. You find an overturned truck with some food and stock up. You can hear the giants behind your back trying to squeeze through the tunnel. Suddenly, a hand reaches out and tries to snatch you, but instead, it grabs a car. You quickly get back to your scooter, your dog under your arm, and drive to the end of the tunnel. The giants are still trying to break through the mountain. The sun rises as you keep driving. You're all alone in this land. Everyone else has already left the country. You stop by some gas stations on your way to refuel. You sleep in abandoned roadside motels. It's been 2 weeks since you last saw a giant, but you prefer to remain low-key. As you drive across the country, you spot some peaceful giants roaming around. You stop for a bit to admire the scene, and it turns out to be a mistake. The giants who were chasing you before appear out of nowhere. You speed away, but they start running on all fours, galloping like gazelles. They're gaining on you. You reach a large lake and drive along its shore. But an aqua giant appears from the water and attempts to grab you. You abruptly change direction and hide in the woods where the creature can't reach you. But the other giants are still on the hunt. You drive until you see a group of people walking together. The giants are behind them. But suddenly, they stop and run away. You're confused at first, but then you see that the people are holding huge loudspeakers. They're emitting high-frequency sounds. Those must sound repelling to the giants. You introduce yourself to the nomads. They refuse to be evacuated. Now, it's never safe to stay in one place, so they're constantly on the move. You join this group of people. They tell you the entire story. A month ago, all the major continents in the world suddenly had giants washed up ashore. After waking up, the human-like creatures started destroying everything in their path. Cities, towns, cars, you name it. These creatures can live in different climates, from the freezing temperatures of the north to the soaring heat of deserts. It seems their only weakness is high-pitched noises that only last for a while. Earth now belongs to them, and there's nothing that can be done to stop the giants. Besides having an enhanced sense of smell, their vision and hearing are also extremely powerful. That's how they were able to spot you, even though you seem to be the size of an ant to them. The people tell you that the evacuation plan didn't work out. The giants could feel vibrations even underground. The only chance to survive and live peacefully is to sail to a small island far away from the mainland. It's nighttime again. The nomads keep moving instead of making a camp. The night is actually the best time to travel, since that's when most of the giants sleep. You've been warned about the most important thing. Being quiet is crucial. You have to ditch your scooter because you arrive at the Forest of Giants. That's where dozens of giants are sleeping, standing up in an empty field. Anything that touches them will wake them up, not to mention any sound they'll hear. The nomads organize themselves and begin maneuvering around the giants, whose feet are the size of a large bus. You're tiptoeing around them, but the feet are everywhere. You manage to get past the giants, but someone in the back accidentally brushes against one of them. The giant is startled awake. This alerts the others. They wake up in a frenzy and start rampaging around. You and the rest of the people sneak away toward the coast without the giants seeing you yet. Over there's a large ship waiting for everyone to board it. Once everyone's ready, the ship starts its journey. The giants don't spot the ship until it's far away from the shore. But the ocean isn't going to stop them. They start swimming as fast as they can, causing massive waves. But these waves just push your ship further away from the giants. But as soon as they get close enough, the people on the ship switch on the loudspeakers. The high-pitched sound scares the giants away. This allows the ship to sail to a deserted island, far, far away from the danger.
Now, we wouldn't call this island mystical unless there were tales of giants living here. The island of Gozo in Malta is the backdrop of an ancient legend. Malta is an island country located in the Mediterranean Sea, just south of Europe. It's a very strategically located archipelago. Throughout history, it was ruled by many different societies, such as the Phoenicians, Greeks, Romans, and Carthaginians. One cold night, thousands of years ago, a farmer noticed the sky turn orange, then red, when he heard a loud thump. Although the ground seemed to be moving, this wasn't an earthquake. When he looked toward the woods, he saw a giant silhouette, taller than the trees. As he fearfully approached, he realized it was a woman, a giant woman. She introduced herself as Sansuna. Unlike the terrible giants of many tales, Sansuna didn't want to exterminate the human race. She was loving and caring. She told the farmer that she and her people could help protect their land from invaders. The locals were pretty interested in this offer. Since Malta is located in an important commercial route, it was constantly being invaded. The story says that Sansuna settled in Malta, and sooner rather than later, she was moving things around. And when I say things, I mean monoliths. Sansuna carried huge stones on her shoulder to build a magnificent temple called Gigantia, which means place of giants. She even did this while holding her half-giant, half-human kid on the other shoulder. Some say Sansuna lived exclusively on beans and honey, although others replace honey with water. The funniest bit here is that Malta is the 10th smallest country in the world, but it somehow managed to host giants. Hey, go figure. The temple looked like a giant game of Tetris, with some stones weighing as much as 20 elephants. Some of these monolithic rocks are so heavy, scholars guess it would take 50 men working together to lift just one stone. Now, as much as this is entertaining, humans never proved giants were real, so this story couldn't be true. There's a brief mention of a species of giants called the Nephilim in some ancient texts. The Nephilims would have been terrible giants that wreaked havoc on the earth and only survived until the Great Flood. But nobody ever found real proof of this species really existing on Earth, until this came along. The world of Maltese archaeology unearthed quite a few shocking things in the past years. One of them are known as the hypogeum skulls. Hypogeum is the Greek word for underground, and this incredible site was discovered in the first decade of the 20th century. Back then, Malta's National Museum director received an important phone call. Someone had accidentally dug some impressive bones and asked him to come check it out. The hypogeum looked like an underground city, filled with mazes and rooms that stretched along multiple floors. They were all made with similar limestones as the Maltese temples above ground. The hypogeum was filled with important relics and artifacts. Scientists quickly understood that the hypogeum was built as a type of final resting place for locals. So, along with skulls, they found a lot of bones and skeletons. One of these artifacts were skulls, but these weren't regular human skulls. Rather, they were of the elongated type. To make matters worse, these skulls were hidden from the public for years. People started to talk and created a bunch of theories behind it. The truth is that this discovery was a turning point for Maltese archaeology, although scientists didn't know what to do with it. Some wondered if these skulls were natural or manipulated, since they knew some cultures in the world used head binds to alter their skulls. Other scientists threw in the hypothesis of little gray people or even the legendary giants. Some say that the elongated skulls could have been sculptures that worshipped otherworldly deities. There was no way to confirm any of these theories, so the question remained: who were the builders of Malta's megalithic temples? Now let's take a look at what scientists know. The Maltese megalithic temples have been standing strong since 3500 BCE, which is even older than the pyramids of Egypt. The main dilemma here is that these temples were built even before we invented writing, yet they required advanced technological skills to exist. The Gigantea Temple seems too absurd to have been built by humans. The South Temple has a corridor with 4 oval rooms on the sides, looking like a big shamrock leaf. In one of these rooms, scientists found altars decorated with spiral patterns. It looked like an altar of some sort, indicating early Maltese people used them for ritualistic purposes. The North Temple is similar but smaller, with a very low entrance that makes people crouch down to get inside. You get it? You need to bow down to their deities in order to get into this sacred place. I mean, one can't help but wonder about the secret reasons these ancient builders had to build such a huge temple. I'm thinking they probably cast one of Daenerys' dragons to move the monoliths around. Yeah, I'm joking here. But hey, remember the entrance to King's Landing? Yup, the series used the Medina Gates in Malta as the exterior of King's Landing during Episode 3 of Season 1. Anyways, back to the giants. The ritualistic theory of the whole thing won a few points when archaeologists uncovered these mysterious figures. They're popularly known as fat ladies. These tiny statues have round bodies and faces that show how much they enjoyed life. They kind of look like a miniature Sunsana, the giantess we talked about. Scientists believe these were statues that celebrated well-being and prosperity. It does prove that the people of the time had advanced craftsmanship skills, and they were pretty intentional with their constructions and art manifestations. One of these statues is known as the Sleeping Lady. This Neolithic piece of art depicts the figure of a large woman lying on her side sleeping. After studying it deeper, scientists guessed this statue was meant to represent the Great Reaper. It was found in the hypogeum, which we now know was a huge resting place. This specific statue is different from all the other fat ladies, starting with the hair and the embroidered skirt. Then there's this statue. This is supposed to represent an 8-foot-tall woman and the rim of her skirt. She was discovered in the most unusual of ways. A farmer was trying to plow his field, but he kept hitting large blocks of stone. All the way back in 1915, the farmer called Malta's National Museum director and asked him to come check it out. Some think this is all the proof you need to confirm that Sunsana was real. Others aren't all that sure. But that's not all. The place where this giant statue was buried revealed one of Malta's most impressive archaeological sites, the Tarsian temples. The temples were made from limestone blocks. Some are 20 feet tall and weigh around 20 tons. Zamet, the museum director, kept digging and discovered multiple sites made of megalithic stones. All of them supposedly built by Stone Age farmers, all stranded on a remote island in the Mediterranean Sea thousands of years ago. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, look at these temples in Manidra. This is probably the world's earliest calendar. On the equinoxes, the sun passes directly through the main doorway, straight down the central axis. On the solstices, there are two superb variations. During the summer solstice, the rays fall on the edge of the megalith to the left of the doorway, and during the winter, the rays fall to the right side of the doorway. It's astronomical precision at its finest. And what about the structures in the Hall Tarsian that we've already talked about? This complex is the oldest one in all of Malta. It was built with the purpose of doing animal offerings to deities. Scientists confirmed this by unearthing numerous animal bones buried in the soil. They also found a great collection of spirals, indicating that the locals also used this temple for ritualistic purposes. Overall, there are 7 megalithic temples in Malta, each more impressive than the other. Scholars keep on digging to see if they can uncover the truth, much like researchers do with the pyramids of Egypt, the lost Mayan cities in the Americas, and other sites.
The Easter Island giant heads are so popular that they even have their own emoji. Their true meaning has been a mystery for hundreds of years. But it looks like we at least know how they were built and transported to their permanent location. The Moai statues consist of 3 parts: a large yellow body, a red hat or top knot, and white inset eyes with a coral iris. Around 1,000 of them were created. The main bodies of most of the statues were made out of volcanic tuff from a local quarry in what used to be a volcano. The material is easy to carve, but not so easy to transport. That's probably why researchers found over 300 unfinished moai back in the quarry. The rest of them stand in various locations, facing the villages as if watching over the locals. So, it looks like the statues were carved lying on their backs. Then, their creators detached them from the rock, moved them down slope, and set them in a vertical position to finish the work. Once it was done, it was time to get the statue to its platform. Now, if you've ever moved houses, you know how physically hard it is. So, imagine having to move a statue that is about half as heavy as a house without a car or any modern equipment for a distance of 3 miles. The locals must have invented some original way of doing it, and scientists tried to recreate it to guess what it was. They tried pulling moai replicas on wooden sleds. They thought someone could have used palm trees for that purpose, but this theory has been debunked. The most successful experiment so far was wielding ropes to rock the statue down the road in a standing position. This method sounds real because the local Rapa Nui legends mention that the moai walked from the quarry. And, of course, they needed a good road to get there. In the early 20th century, researcher Catherine Rutledge identified an 800-year-old road network on the island. It was a bunch of pathways around 15 feet wide going from the quarry. She thought that those roads were ceremonial and not built just for the statues. She wasn't a famous scientist back then, so others mostly ignored the theory. Several decades later, famous Norwegian adventurer and archaeologist Thor Heyerdahl published his theory. He mentioned that the roads were built exclusively to transport the moai, and some of the statues were dropped along the roads for some reason. But in 2010, researchers found that the statues weren't randomly dropped. They actually reached their final destinations, as they were all set on hidden platforms. Plus, the road floor was U-shaped, so pulling massive statues along them wouldn't be easy.
You can still find roughly 15.5 miles of these roads on the island and see them from satellite images. And it looks like Catherine Rutledge was right about them. The roads were probably built for pilgrims to a sacred volcano, and the moai standing by them were sort of signposts. Halfway across the world in southern England lies another mystery made of stone, a massive sound illusion, a symbol of unity, a burial ground, or more. Scientists are still debating the purpose of Stonehenge. It took Neolithic builders around 1,500 years to construct this beauty made of roughly 100 stones standing upright in a circle. Millions of tourists come to see it every year, and heritage protectors were worried about the modern road snaking close to the landmark. That modern road is now sunk into the ground below the grass level. And even though archaeologists assumed they could find an older road under it, they didn't have any high hopes. But when they took off a layer of asphalt, they noticed two parallel ditches that were nearly perpendicular to the road. The ditches connected the shortened sections of the avenue. That's what the archaeologists call the ancient pathway leading up to Stonehenge. It proves that the ancient people used to visit the monument for their purposes and probably some ceremonies. Another interesting find during a dry summer was 3 dry patch marks within the stone circle. It looks like they were left there by 3 massive boulders. So Stonehenge could have been a full circle once. In 2021, archaeologists found a Roman road submerged in the Venetian lagoon. The fact that it runs there on the bottom for nearly 4,000 feet is proof that the Romans were here before sea levels rose and flooded the area. It supports the theory that there was an important settlement here centuries before Venice was founded at the spot in the 5th century CE. The ancient Romans were great at many things, and one of them was building roads. And it looks like they weren't afraid to work on the trickiest terrain. Scans have shown that the ancient road was built right on the beach, and it requires some serious skills. Imagine a village from over 1,000 years ago frozen in time. There's still half-eaten food on the tables and personal things left in a rush. It's all preserved so well because it's covered by volcanic ash. Researchers found this village in 2011 in modern-day El Salvador. They believe there was a mass celebration in a Maya village called Seren over 1,400 years ago. The whole village was there, preparing the main temple for a ritual when a nearby volcano erupted. The 200-plus residents had no time to rush back to their homes. To save their lives, they had to flee the plaza and run south on a raised road called Sacbe. They managed to escape from the plumes of volcanic ash. In addition to being a superhero and saving all the people, the road had another cool feature. All Sacbe roads had an outer layer of stones, but this one was made of ash. Ironic, isn't it? It proves that the Maya people didn't only use stones to build their roads. Archaeologists discovered several coins in Jerusalem when they were excavating an old street. When they saw the minting dates, they realized the road was built when Pontius Pilate was the Roman governor of Judea. Since he was the local ruler, it's almost clear that he gave the order to build the road. The pilgrims most likely used this road to reach the Temple Mount for worship. The pathway, which was laid with over 10,000 tons of limestone, was almost as broad as a London bus is long. It had been there for 2,000 years. It's not common that you find such a luxurious road, and it's not clear why a Roman governor would spend so much money on the road. It was probably his attempt to make the city's population like him. Plus, it was a great way to show he had both money and influence. The Old North Trail is an ancient highway that the inhabitants of North America used for 10,000 years, first on foot, then with dogs, and finally with horses. The first travelers moved around the continent down its paths for thousands of miles long before the first Europeans arrived, and even during the last ice age. They used it to carry trade goods, visit relatives, find a mate, or just explore. Researchers keep finding evidence that the stories and legends of the Blackfoot Indians about this trail are real. And it could be even the road that served one of the most massive human migrations. The people who crossed from Asia on the Bering Land Bridge about 15,000 years ago and settled in North America might have used the ice-free corridor along the Rockies, which later became a part of the trail. The Nakasendo Highway was built in the 17th century during the Edo period of Japanese history to link Kyoto and Tokyo. The 310-mile-long road runs across mountain ranges and down onto the plain. It was one of the 5 main roads used by the feudal lords and their families to travel to the capital. There were 69 post stations on the route where travelers could stay overnight. The road was built for horses and pedestrians, as the Japanese didn't use carts. You can still walk parts of the route.
You come to sunny California and go for a hike in the Santa Lucia Mountains. There, you have a strange, unpleasant feeling, as if someone's watching you. You look around, but don't see a single soul. That's when you glance at the tops of distant mountains in front of you, and your heart skips a beat. Up on the peaks, you can see the outline of a giant humanoid figure, arms stretched out with a magnificent full rainbow circling it. This mysterious figure is dressed in all black. You can't make out any facial expressions or detail, but you can see it moving. Then it vanishes right before your eyes. Congrats! You've just witnessed the Dark Watchers, a phenomenon that's been terrifying hikers in the California mountains for over 300 years. Even now, scientists can't give an exact explanation for this mysterious appearance. What we do know is it's completely natural, probably. One theory claims that there are no silhouettes at all. The human brain just thinks up images created by shadows the clouds cast on the mountains. Over the centuries, people share stories about this legend, and their minds begin to show it, building recognizable images. The same can happen to you, like when you see the contours of a human face on a burnt piece of toast, or the shape of a dog in a passing cloud. The most accepted scientific explanation is what's called a Brocken specter. It's when sunlight gets bent by drops of fog or clouds. That explains the rainbow surrounding these figures. As for the shadow, it's only your own being stretched and projected on the mountains before you. After all, these figures usually show up when the sun is behind the witness. Natural or not, the vanishing mysterious figure scared the wits out of you. So you head east and find yourself in the desert. The blazing sun beats down on your back. There's nothing for hundreds of miles around. Hard to believe this dry, lifeless plain was once the bottom of a lake. You notice a long trail in the sand, as if someone was pushing or pulling something really heavy across the ground. You follow the strange trail, and at the end you find a single large stone. But why would anyone drag a heavy rock across the middle of the desert? But nothing touched the stone. It moved by itself. It's a phenomenon called sailing stones. Every winter, ice covers the ground here. When a strong enough wind blows, the stone starts to glide across the slippery surface. Once the ice melts, all that's left is a winding trail behind a single lonesome rock. Well, for some relief from the scorching California sun, we head to Antarctica. Snow, ice, and more blinding sun. Yep, it's a desert too. The light is almost blinding. You squint, and off in the distance, you see something red sticking out from all the surrounding endless white. As you get closer, you realize it's a waterfall, an ominous red cascade flowing from the glacier. Splashes fly in all directions and stain the white snow. Don't worry, these so-called blood falls are nothing of the sort. Millions of years ago, I wasn't around then, a glacier formed over a pond and blocked access to sunlight, heat, and oxygen. Then the pond managed to break through the glacier with a little trickle of water. When such salty water with high levels of iron meets oxygen, it creates that scarlet rust color. This is the only waterfall of its kind in the world. Now, in the town of Taos, New Mexico, locals hear a strange hum every day. But not all of them. For some reason, only about 2% of the residents can hear the sound. Some theories proposed it's caused by the location's unusual acoustics. Others put it down to some strange auditory hallucination or even something more sinister. Unexplainable sounds happen on other worlds as well. In 2020, the Mars rover recorded a strange hum coming from the red planet. It's a quiet, continuous drone that sometimes fluctuates because of Marsquakes. Back on Earth, we head to the warm rainforests of Southeast Asia. You see a tree that looks as if someone poured paint all over it. But the rainbow eucalyptus was painted by nature. Its unusual bark changes colors over time like a kaleidoscope. It starts off as a bright green shade, then red, orange, purple, and finally brown. Then the colorful cycle starts again. One of the biggest mysteries of nature is ball lightning. It's a glowing blue, orange, or yellow sphere that appears during a thunderstorm. Many witnesses say they hear a hissing sound and detect a strong odor with it. The first mention of ball lightning described it breaking through a window and disappearing. As with any mystery, scientists can't explain the exact cause. A popular theory is that ordinary lightning strikes the ground and causes a reaction between oxygen and vaporized soil elements. Ball lightning often occurs during earthquakes, when it usually takes the form of a blue flame coming out of the ground. The ball lightning phenomenon happens all over the world, but so far, no one's been able to snap a picture of it. There's an extremely unusual volcano in Java. If you go there at night, you'll see an electric blue flame burning from the ground, along with oozing bright blue lava. It's incredibly hot, but that's not actually lava. All this unusual blue is sulfur gas escaping from crevices in the volcano and catching on fire. It also condenses into a liquid form and looks like blue lava flowing down. As soon as you come to the Namib Desert, you immediately notice something very strange. Sprinkled among the dry grasslands are almost perfect circles of dirt where nothing grows. These massive polka dots are called fairy circles, and, you guessed it, nobody really knows what causes them. The likely culprit is termites eating the grass around their underground colony. Well, that could explain the circles' differing sizes. The bugs continue to eat as the colony expands outwards, but they stop before they encroach on a neighboring colony. The patches where you do see grass show a sort of boundary separating different termite populations, or so goes the theory. Heading down under to Australia's Lake Hillier. Your eyes don't deceive you. Yes, that lake is bubblegum pink, and it's perfectly safe to swim in. The giant pink puddle is a salt lake, and it's not the only one of its kind in the world. Salt lakes are pink because of a kind of algae and other microorganisms living in them. They produce a red pigment to protect themselves from the sun. What's unique about Lake Hillier, though, is the water is still pink even if you scoop it up into a glass, and it remains bright pink all year round. The same can't be said about other pink lakes. Japan is home to one of the most famous active volcanoes in the world. It's special because it creates an incredible natural phenomenon, a dirty thunderstorm. The volcano regularly spews out a black cloud of smoke, ash, and lightning. During an ordinary storm, ice crystals collide with each other and cause discharge, creating lightning. In a dirty thunderstorm, particles of volcanic ash collide instead of ice. A peaceful night on the beach. The waves wash up on the shore and glow neon blue. But it's not the water that's glowing, it's the creatures living in it. This phenomenon is called bioluminescence. Plankton and algae release this glow when waves disturb them. Some fish, squid, and crustaceans can emit neon light as well to lure prey. No time to walk along the shore enjoying the natural light show. Hurry, we're heading out to open sea. There's no storm or wind at all. Which is why it's so surprising when you see a massive wave 5 stories high suddenly sweep across the calm waters. It nearly overturns your boat. But just as soon as it arrives, it vanishes in an instant. What was that? This unpredictable and still unexplained danger is called a rogue wave. One theory of how they form is from the sea's surface encountering a strong headwind. But remember, you didn't feel any wind blowing. Theory number 2, and the most accepted one, different waves combine to form one large one. It's something called kinetic vampirism. Under certain natural conditions, waves accumulate and exchange kinetic energy. Among all the waves, there will be one that absorbs the energy from the others like a vampire. When a lot of energy is accumulated, it releases itself in the form of a giant wave.
Not much happens in dark, murky ocean depths. It's mostly pretty quiet, with some smaller fish carefully passing by and probably hoping nothing big would grab them on their way. There's also a bigger fellow looking for plankton coming through every now and then. Suddenly, a giant beast comes out of nowhere. First, it's just a dark dot in the distance, until it gets closer. Oh, it's a great white shark. You can recognize its firm, dark gray body, white belly, and slanted head. These creatures have special cells in their skin called melanocytes that can make their color change to lighter or darker. This way, a shark can blend in with its surroundings, which is a nice ace up its sleeve and the reason why we barely even see one coming by. These predators can grow up to be more than 20 feet and weigh up to 5,000 pounds. Our fierce fella is just passing by looking for some lost fish that might wander around, if it gets lucky, directly into its mouth. But instead, a giant jagged tentacle comes out of nowhere. The great white barely escaped it, and quickly swam a little further to see what was happening. A giant squid comes out of the depths. Its eyes, as large as dinner plates, are looking straight at the shark, while its soft body is getting closer. A challenging prey, but hey, why not try? Most of the time, these creatures eat shrimp, fish, and other squid, but sometimes they like to really treat themselves, so they go after small whales. A shark will do too. I know you'd expect these creatures to be way smaller, or that's at least how I comfort myself when I swim a little further from the shore where my feet can't touch the bottom anymore. But they can weigh 600 pounds and be 40 feet long. The great white shark is the biggest predatory shark on our planet. Check out its long and sharp teeth. It definitely has the biggest smile down there in the ocean. Great whites have around 300 teeth, but they don't use most of them for biting. Instead, they have a special system where new teeth grow all the time because they need to replace the ones that get worn out or lost. And they have a really powerful bite, over 20 times stronger than ours. Considering all that, you might think a great white shark has nothing to be afraid of in the ocean. But looking at its gigantic enemy, we can't be so sure of that anymore. Octopuses only have 8 arms. Squids too, but they also have 2 additional tentacles. They're similar to their arms, but suckers on the arms go along most of their length, while tentacles have suckers only at the ends. This squid has probably hundreds or even thousands of suckers. There are squids without these suction cups, but in that case, they have rotating hooks, or a combination where these two work together. Hooks catch prey, and suckers stick on it so it doesn't get away. Squids have teeth too. Plus they have this special part called a radula. It's like a tongue, but with teeth on it. The teeth are tightly packed together and are difficult to remove. When food is passed to the radula, the teeth chew it into small pieces. This is important because squids have sensitive body parts near their throat, so they need pieces of their food to be very small. Their bite may not be as strong as the great white sharks, but it's still quite powerful. For instance, way stronger than a lion's. They also have glands that produce venom and use their beaks and radula to inject the venom into their prey or a creature that's coming after them. Wow, these squids are really equipped better than expected. And they're also way longer than the great white, which gives the squid more room to attack it with its long tentacles from a distance and seize it. Giant squids usually live at depths of 2,950 feet, while great whites prefer to stay at depths of about 650 feet. But we'll try to keep the competition fair. Let's say these two meet in a territory where water pressure won't hurt or bother any of these animals. The great white is circling around the squid. It moves a bit faster than the squid. Its swimming speed can reach 25 miles per hour when the animal is submerged, and it also has short bursts of speed when it can move at 35 miles per hour. Giant squids move at around 25 miles per hour. Just for comparison, an average human swims at 2 miles per hour. But with its length, the giant squid has more room to attack the great white shark with its long tentacles from a distance. They can stretch for 33 feet to snatch the prey. And look, it's really trying. But it ain't that easy. Not only is the great white big and fast, but it also has special sensors called the ampullae of Lorenzini. It's a good tool to detect prey and generally stay safe in the ocean. But the squid is definitely no joke. It has activated its special defense mechanism and released thick black ink. The great white is confused. The ink is like a smoke screen, which gives the squid enough time to get away. The shark can't see its opponent anymore. The squid is getting closer, and the poor great white has no idea from which direction. It's time for the final move. Even if the great white manages to catch the squid can detach parts of its body as a last resort to protect itself. It can lose up to 10 body parts, unlike sharks. These predators can't lose any essential body parts because they won't survive. And look, the squid finally latches onto the shark. Its suction cups and the sharp beak that can pierce its prey make it nearly impossible for the shark to escape. They both disappear into a cloud of ink, the great white shark in one of the rare fights it can lose, and the giant squid ready for new conquests across the ocean. Aren't giant squids perfect for scary stories? In legends, there are often battles between humans and sea monsters. In the past, Norwegian sailors shared stories about sea creatures they encountered during their ocean travels. Over time, these stories grew to include creatures that were like giant islands with arms. And let's not forget about the Kraken. It's a legendary sea monster from Scandinavian stories that looked like an island, which was how it would trick sailors. The spooky stories say the beast was using its long tentacles to grab ships and drag them to their doom. And do you remember Jules Verne's novel 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which describes an encounter between a ship and a giant squid? In real life, giant squids don't eat humans, and they're not particularly interested in going after ships. However, not all the stories about these creatures attacking ships are made up. There are some reports. For example, in the 1930s, something attacked a Norwegian tanker, the Brunswick, 3 times. And yes, it was indeed the work of a giant squid. Fortunately, the squid couldn't grip onto the ship's steel hull, so it ended up getting caught in the propellers. But even though everything was okay in the end, just looking at this gigantic monster trying to take your ship down to the bottom must have been terrifying. We can laugh at stories about the Kraken until we're out there on our own. In 2003, a giant squid came closer to a French yacht that was participating in a sailing race. It couldn't cause any harm, so it eventually gave up. So, for now, the idea of a giant squid taking down a ship or boat remains a fictional story, although they're certainly capable of trying. Okay, giant squids are big, but there's another creature from their family of cephalopods that can be even larger. It's called the colossal squid, and one that was found weighed 992 pounds, hundreds of pounds more than the giant squid, 606 pounds. And they can stretch their tentacles for up to 45 feet.
Imagine you've booked a tour through the jungles of Costa Rica. All of a sudden, you stumble upon a huge stone sphere, nearly the length of a king-sized bed in diameter. How on earth did it end up there? And what does it symbolize? You immediately ask your guide. He's not as amazed as you are and tells you that there are actually several hundreds of them scattered across the south of the country. The mysterious stone spheres don't have an official name. The locals simply call them las bolas, which means balls in Spanish, while historians refer to them as dequispheres, after the culture that produced them. Scientists have studied the sediment layers of the Earth around them and estimate that the earliest were made around the year 600 CE, and the newest ones date to the year 1000 CE. Many of the spheres were relocated after their initial discovery, and that's why archaeologists can't date them precisely. The dequis culture completely disappeared shortly after they were discovered by the Spanish in the 16th century. Unlike the Mayas and the Aztecs, the myths or legends of these peoples didn't survive, so they cannot explain the existence of the mysterious orbs. More than 300 of these objects have been discovered so far, with some being smaller than 1 inch in diameter, and the largest measures 6.6 feet in diameter, standing taller than most humans. Although there are ones made from limestone, most spheres were carved out of a coarse version of basalt, a type of rock that forms when lava cools rapidly. Some orbs weigh up to 15 tons, and in most cases, their surface is smooth to the touch, although there are coarse, mostly unfinished pieces. If we throw away the theory that river erosion naturally sculpted the spheres, the ancient people seem to have created them by hammering boulders with other rocks. Once they got the rough shape they were aiming for, they would polish the rock to perfection, using techniques such as controlled fracture and grinding. The mysterious spheres are located in the Dequis Delta, on the coast of the Pacific Ocean. Most of them can be found in a place called Farm 6, which, alongside 3 other sites, was proclaimed a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2014. The area contains other finds from the pre-Columbian era, such as paved areas, burial sites, and mounds. For centuries, the stone balls were hidden under a thick layer of sediment that protected them against the elements and looters, until they were unearthed during the 1930s. The company that owned the land was clearing the rainforest for banana plantations when they stumbled upon these unusual stone constructions. Some were damaged by bulldozers, and some by workers trying to pry them open, as they believed there was gold hidden inside. It took a while before the authorities intervened to stop further damage to the finds. Doris Stone, the daughter of an executive of the company that owned the land, was the first to study the spheres. In 1943, she published an article in a leading American archaeological journal, turning the world's attention to the orbs. Expeditions soon followed, and archaeologists were immediately able to determine that the stone formations were human-made, probably created by the ancient indigenous population of Costa Rica. To this day, no one has been able to fully explain their function in a scientific way. It means there's still room for some wild theories about the sphere's origins and true purpose. The most popular theory in the scientific community is that the stone spheres served as decorations and status symbols, as many of them were found near the houses of chieftains. Local tribal leaders were also laid to rest with some of the smaller balls, so these stone formations were definitely associated with power in some way. Chiseling a boulder to perfection involved a lot of labor and planning, and only powerful individuals could afford it at the time. The other popular theory is that the boulders were used for astronomical observations. Individual spheres represented stars or planets, like a primitive map of the night sky. Since they were perfectly round, it was easy to roll them around. Before the jungle engulfed them, the area where they were found was a flat alluvial plain, ideal for rolling large boulders around. Another version of this theory suggests that the stones were used as boundary markers, much like modern border stones, which are also mostly made from stone. Finally, legends from other tribes that lived in the area tell of how the spheres were cannonballs that the deity of thunder used to drive away the deity of winds and hurricanes. We still don't know the original purpose of the Costa Rican spheres, but they remain an important part of the country's national identity. The National Museum in the Costa Rican capital, San Jose, has 6 of them in its courtyard. Many other spheres have become prized garden decorations for wealthy Costa Ricans. There's even one at Harvard University. More than a millennium after they were created, the mysterious stone spheres of Costa Rica are still associated with power and wealth. In terms of numbers, the stone orbs are not perfectly round. They are rated as nearly perfect at 96% spherical in shape. And while even that is pretty impressive, the spheres of Costa Rica are not the only ones of their kind. Nearly a decade ago, workers came across mysterious giant stone spheres deep underground in a coal mine in northern Asia. The surface of the spheres, which measured a little over the length of a human footstep in diameter, was unusually smooth, and people tried to explain it somehow. Some were certain they were out of this world, and others suggested the spheres were actually petrified dinosaur eggs. Scientists quickly put an end to further discussion, as it turned out that the mysterious spheres were concretions. Those are rock formations that take millions of years to form deep underground. Think of a pebble that picks up snow as it rolls down a hill. That's how concretions are made. Groundwater, rich in sediment and minerals, flows around the sediment, slowly shaping it into a perfect orb. The process is quite common in nature, but most concretions are fairly small. The spheres found in the coal mine grew to their size in the mineral-rich ground, and they were big enough to get the press and the general public interested. Another possible case of concretions is the massive stone spheres found in the Visoko Valley in Bosnia. Samir Osmanagic, better known as the Bosnian Indiana Jones, was the first to explore those objects about as wide as the length of a London bus. He believes the stone spheres were carved by a lost civilization that lived in the area 1,000 years ago. The reddish color of the orbs, though, is proof to geologists that they are indeed concretions, rich in iron content. The Moki marbles, found in rural Utah, are similar in color to the Bosnian spheres. These tiny concretions are the size of toy marbles and consist of a sandstone core and a shell made out of hematite, an iron ore. In South Africa, miners have come across Klerksdorp spheres, which are similar in shape and size to Moki marbles. The only difference is that these ones formed inside volcanic sediments and ash. The most intriguing among human-made tiny spheres are probably the orbs found on several Greek islands. Scientists discovered 700 stones smaller than golf balls near the Bronze Age site of Akrotiri on the island of Santorini. They believe that the finds were between 3,600 and 4,500 years old. When they compared all the stones' variations in size and color, the archaeologists concluded that these enigmatic stones could have easily been the oldest board game ever made. With the help of artificial intelligence, scientists are now trying to work out the rules of this game.
The Easter Island giant heads are so popular that they even have their own emoji. Their true meaning has been a mystery for hundreds of years. But it looks like we at least know how they were built and transported to their permanent location. The Moai statues consist of 3 parts: a large yellow body, a red hat or top knot, and white inset eyes with a coral iris. Around 1,000 of them were created. The main bodies of most of the statues were made out of volcanic tuff from a local quarry in what used to be a volcano. The material is easy to carve, but not so easy to transport. That's probably why researchers found over 300 unfinished moai back in the quarry. The rest of them stand in various locations, facing the villages as if watching over the locals. So, it looks like the statues were carved lying on their backs. Then, their creators detached them from the rock, moved them down slope, and set them in a vertical position to finish the work. Once it was done, it was time to get the statue to its platform. Now, if you've ever moved houses, you know how physically hard it is. So, imagine having to move a statue that is about half as heavy as a house without a car or any modern equipment for a distance of 3 miles. The locals must have invented some original way of doing it, and scientists tried to recreate it to guess what it was. They tried pulling moai replicas on wooden sleds. They thought someone could have used palm trees for that purpose, but this theory has been debunked. The most successful experiment so far was wielding ropes to rock the statue down the road in a standing position. This method sounds real because the local Rapa Nui legends mention that the moai walked from the quarry. And, of course, they needed a good road to get there. In the early 20th century, researcher Catherine Rutledge identified an 800-year-old road network on the island. It was a bunch of pathways around 15 feet wide going from the quarry. She thought that those roads were ceremonial and not built just for the statues. She wasn't a famous scientist back then, so others mostly ignored the theory. Several decades later, famous Norwegian adventurer and archaeologist Thor Heyerdahl published his theory. He mentioned that the roads were built exclusively to transport the moai, and some of the statues were dropped along the roads for some reason. But in 2010, researchers found that the statues weren't randomly dropped. They actually reached their final destinations as they were all set on hidden platforms. Plus, the road floor was U-shaped, so pulling massive statues along them wouldn't be easy. You can still find roughly 15.5 miles of these roads on the island and see them from satellite images. And it looks like Catherine Rutledge was right about them. The roads were probably built for pilgrims to a sacred volcano, and the moai standing by them were sort of signposts. Halfway across the world in southern England lies another mystery made of stone, a massive sound illusion, a symbol of unity, a burial ground, or more. Scientists are still debating the purpose of Stonehenge. It took Neolithic builders around 1,500 years to construct this beauty made of roughly 100 stones standing upright in a circle. Millions of tourists come to see it every year, and heritage protectors were worried about the modern road snaking close to the landmark. That modern road is now sunk into the ground below the grass level. And even though archaeologists assumed they could find an older road under it, they didn't have any high hopes. But when they took off a layer of asphalt, they noticed 2 parallel ditches that were nearly perpendicular to the road. The ditches connected the shortened sections of the avenue. That's what the archaeologists call the ancient pathway leading up to Stonehenge. It proves that the ancient people used to visit the monument for their purposes, and probably some ceremonies. Another interesting find during a dry summer was 3 dry patch marks within the stone circle. It looks like they were left there by 3 massive boulders. So Stonehenge could have been a full circle once. In 2021, archaeologists found a Roman road submerged in the Venetian lagoon. The fact that it runs there on the bottom for nearly 4,000 feet is proof that the Romans were here before sea levels rose and flooded the area. It supports the theory that there was an important settlement here centuries before Venice was founded at the spot in the 5th century CE. The ancient Romans were great at many things, and one of them was building roads. And it looks like they weren't afraid to work on the trickiest terrain. Scans have shown that the ancient road was built right on the beach, and it requires some serious skills. Imagine a village from over 1,000 years ago frozen in time. There's still half-eaten food on the tables and personal things left in a rush. It's all preserved so well because it's covered by volcanic ash. Researchers found this village in 2011 in modern-day El Salvador. They believe there was a mass celebration in a Maya village called Seren over 1,400 years ago. The whole village was there, preparing the main temple for a ritual when a nearby volcano erupted. The 200-plus residents had no time to rush back to their homes. To save their lives, they had to flee the plaza and run south on a raised road called Sakbe. They managed to escape from the plumes of volcanic ash. In addition to being a superhero and saving all the people, the road had another cool feature. All Sakbe roads had an outer layer of stones, but this one was made of ash. Ironic, isn't it? It proves that the Maya people didn't only use stones to build their roads. Archaeologists discovered several coins in Jerusalem when they were excavating an old street. When they saw the minting dates, they realized the road was built when Pontius Pilate was the Roman governor of Judea. Since he was the local ruler, it's almost clear that he gave the order to build the road. The pilgrims most likely used this road to reach the Temple Mount for worship. The pathway, which was laid with over 10,000 tons of limestone, was almost as broad as a London bus is long. It had been there for 2,000 years. It's not common that you find such a luxurious road, and it's not clear why a Roman governor would spend so much money on the road. It was probably his attempt to make the city's population like him. Plus, it was a great way to show he had both money and influence. The Old North Trail is an ancient highway that the inhabitants of North America used for 10,000 years. First on foot, then with dogs, and finally with horses. The first travelers moved around the continent down its paths for thousands of miles long before the first Europeans arrived, and even during the last ice age. They used it to carry trade goods, visit relatives, find a mate, or just explore. Researchers keep finding evidence that the stories and legends of the Blackfoot Indians about this trail are real. And it could be even the road that served one of the most massive human migrations. The people who crossed from Asia on the Bering Land Bridge about 15,000 years ago and settled in North America might have used the ice-free corridor along the Rockies, which later became a part of the trail. The Nakasendo Highway was built in the 17th century during the Edo period of Japanese history to link Kyoto and Tokyo. The 310-mile-long road runs across mountain ranges and down onto the plain. It was one of the 5 main roads used by the feudal lords and their families to travel to the capital. There were 69 post stations on the route where travelers could stay overnight. The road was built for horses and pedestrians, as the Japanese didn't use carts. You can still walk parts of the route. Jupiter is the largest planet in the solar system. More than 1,300 Earths could fit inside this gas giant. It's also 2.5 times more massive than all the other planets of the solar system combined. But if you think this is mind-boggling, I've got some great news for you. Very recently, a team of astronomers have discovered a much bigger planet with the help of the Subaru telescope and the NASA Hubble Space Telescope. It's a Jupiter-like protoplanet orbiting a very young star, AB Aurigae. The star is probably still forming and is no more than 5 million years old. For comparison, our Sun is 4.6 billion years old. The young star is located at around 531 light-years away from Earth in the constellation of Aurigae. The star is shrouded in a thick, quickly moving layer of gas and dust. This disk feeds the growth of the star. Later, what's left of the disk will come together to form the elements of the planetary system. Planets, dwarf planets, comets, asteroids, you name it. But back to the newly discovered planet. It's a gas giant whose mass equals that of 9 Jupiters. Can you imagine this colossus? It takes the planet, named AB Aurigae B, almost 588 Earth years to complete just one journey around its parent star. Maybe because it's 93.9 AU, astronomical units, away from it. Now, why is the discovery of this planet so amazing? Because according to astronomers, it's been forming in a very bizarre way. Or should I say, is forming, since this gas giant is still in the process. Anyway, the unusual thing is that AB Aurigae B is coming together as a result of a top-down gravitational collapse of giant clouds of gas. But scientists say that a much more common model of planetary formation is when dust and rocks gradually accumulate around some kind of core. This proves the idea that there are numerous ways for planets to form. It can also mean that there probably are very diverse planetary systems in our home Milky Way galaxy. But AB Aurigae B isn't the largest exoplanet ever discovered. In 2005, astronomers spotted a mysterious space body. Later, they called it GQ Lupi b. The thing was orbiting a young star at a distance 2.5 times greater than that between the Sun and Pluto. Scientists came to the conclusion that the object was either a planet or a brown dwarf, which is basically a tiny star. If astronomers decide that GQ Lupi b is a planet, it will be the largest ever found, with a radius that is 3.5 times that of Jupiter. The biggest star we know about is called UY Scuti. This hypergiant has a radius that is about 1,700 times greater than that of the Sun. If you somehow manage to place UY Scuti in the center of the solar system, its edges would stretch far beyond Jupiter's orbit. As for the dust and gas streaming from the star, all this would extend beyond the orbit of Pluto. That's 400 times the Sun-Earth distance. A black hole is a spot in space where the pull of gravity is so strong that even light can't escape it. But why is gravity so powerful there? Because matter is squeezed into a teeny tiny space. Supermassive black holes, which can be many millions of times the mass of the Sun, tend to lurk in the centers of galaxies. The most massive black hole astronomers have discovered so far is TUN 618. Its mass is equal to that of 66 billion suns. It was the year 2010. With the help of the Fermi telescope, astronomers spotted something ginormous, something entering the Milky Way. Their discovery looked like massive blobs of matter that could only be observed in particular wavelengths of light. They were also about 25,000 light-years tall. Scientists think that the blobs, called Fermi bubbles, could be produced by our galaxy's central black hole. Space seems to be extremely deserted, but some places are even emptier than the rest, like supervoid in Eridanus. Astronomers noticed this huge region of empty space in 2004. The area stretches 1.8 billion light-years across. It's mysteriously devoid of gas, dust, stars, and even dark matter. A nebula is a massive cloud of gas and dust floating in space. Some nebulae form when a star is nearing the end of its life and throws out loads of gas and dust. Others appear in regions where new stars are forming. The largest nebula we know about is the Tarantula Nebula. In its longest span, it measures over 1,800 light-years. This nebula, also known as 30 Doradus, is located around 170,000 light-years away from Earth. Unlike its namesake, the tarantula isn't dangerous. Quite the opposite. It's a stellar nursery. which means it's a region where tons of young stars are born. Even cooler, it's the most active star-forming area in our entire galactic neighborhood. In 2021, the biggest ever comet we know about entered our solar system. It was 85 miles across, and its icy nucleus was 50 times greater than the nucleus of the previous record breaker. The intruder's mass was a whopping 100,000 times bigger than that of the average comet. In fact, see 2014 UN 271, Bernardinelli Bernstein, was so large that astronomers first classified it as a minor planet. Is it going to crash into Earth? Nah. It won't get closer than 1 billion miles to our beautiful green planet, and it won't happen until 2031. But could there be comets even bigger than that? Who knows, but the thought is terrifying. There are loads of bizarre things in the universe, and hypothetical nuclear pasta is one of them. If it does exist, nuclear pasta is the strongest material in the entire universe. It forms from the leftovers of extinguished stars when this substance gets squeezed into spaghetti-like tangles of material. It can theoretically break, but only if you apply 10 billion times the pressure needed to shatter steel. Pulsars are spherical space objects the size of a large city, but they pack more mass than the entire sun. They radiate 2 narrow beams of light, sending them in opposite directions. The Black Widow pulsar, just like its spider namesake, is munching on its partner. It's a lightweight brown dwarf star. The more material the pulsar consumes, the more slowly it spins. The energy the neutron star is losing in the process causes its companion star to dwindle. Haumea is a dwarf planet orbiting the Kuiper Belt. It's a donut-shaped ring of objects around the Sun that extends just beyond the orbit of Neptune. The mini-planet has a bizarre, elongated shape and 2 moons. The day on this planet lasts just 4 hours, which makes it the fastest spinning large object in the solar system. But the most mysterious thing about Haumea is that the planet has a thin, 40-mile-wide ring circling it. What is it? Where did it come from? No one knows. Could be the result of a collision that happened in the distant past. The 18th brightest star in the night sky, Fomalhaut, is a terrifying sight. It's dubbed the Eye of Sauron because it looks like a ring of dust and debris circling it. It makes the star look like a giant eye staring into your soul. The intimidating star is more than twice the mass of the Sun. It's 25 light-years away from Earth, which isn't that far away considering distances in space. Look at this butterfly. Its wingspan is more than 3 light-years, and the structure inside this nebula is one of the most complicated ever observed. The nebula's central star, a white dwarf, is heated to an incredible 450,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It means it was formed from another gargantuan star, more than 5 times the size of the Sun. The white dwarf is surrounded by a thick disk of dust and gas at the equator. That's what probably makes the whole structure look like an hourglass or a butterfly.
If you could dive right into the mysterious darkness of the ocean depths, who knows what you'd come upon? Legends that are hundreds of years old mention some giant sea monsters hiding deep down below the ocean waves, like the Kraken, the Loch Ness Monster, the Hydra, Leviathan, and so many more. Okay, no one has ever seen such monsters, but there are still weird and unusually big sea spiders, squid, worms, and many other animals that grew way more than we'd expected. Take a look at the colossal squid from sub-Antarctic waters. It's around 14 times longer than the arrow squid that lives near New Zealand. And deep down in the Pacific Ocean, there's a sea sponge as big as a minivan. Oceans contain about 96.5% of all water on our planet. Up to 80% of all life on Earth we've discovered is under the oceanic waves. We haven't explored, mapped, or even seen more than 80% of the ocean. In fact, we've mapped Mars better than we have the ocean bottom. The pressure down there is insane, and it would make you feel like you're holding up almost 50 jumbo jets, and temperatures at such depths are extremely low. Conditions deep below the oceanic surface are harsh, so creatures that live there need to adjust. That's why many of them grew very, very big to survive. Creatures that live in cold, dark depths are so big because of a phenomenon called deep-sea gigantism. The deeper you go below the oceanic surface, the less sunlight there is. That's why the temperatures drastically fall. The result of this is increased cell size and longer life of creatures. Also, these creatures don't have as much oxygen as the marine animals that live in shallower parts, and their food sources are minimal. Much of the food they get comes from shallower waters, and only a little bit trickles down to the deeper parts. And when there's not enough food, being large is an advantage. Larger creatures can move farther and faster to find something to eat. Their metabolism works slower. They don't digest the food that fast, so they can store food and conserve energy for hard times when they can't find anything to eat. They don't need to regulate their body temperature either, which also helps them save some energy, which they can then transfer to other body processes. They mature more slowly and later than those living in shallow waters. The majority of fish species that dwell in deep waters live 30 years or even more. Orange ruffy fish, on the other hand, live up to 150 years. This fella grows 24 feet in length and weighs up to 1.5 tons. But it grows to be so big for centuries. They start looking for partners when they're 150 years old, and they can also live this long because there are not so many predators at such depths. Also, there are no humans or other things that can disturb them or endanger their existence. At such depths, the environment is pretty stable, so many animals there are like living fossils because they probably haven't changed in millions of years. The first 650 feet of the ocean's depth are considered to be the open ocean. The majority of the marine life we've discovered lives there, since that's the area the sun can still reach. And then, as you continue going deeper, you reach the twilight zone. It seems like nothing lives there. But at about 820 feet, you see a small oasis of ancient life blooming. For example, there are sea lilies, animals that have been living at such depths unchanged for millions of years. Coelacanths, another living fossil, have been living in the ocean for more than 360 million years. Hagfish haven't changed in a very long time either, for over 300 million years. This creature lives at depths of 5,500 feet. They evolved before the rest of the vertebrates, which is why this is the only living animal without jaws or a spine, even though it still has a skull. Deep-sea creatures can't survive in shallow waters. They've evolved to live in depths under bigger hydrostatic pressure. Humans and other organisms that have internal spaces filled with gas would end up crushed if we could go to such depths. That's why deep-sea divers always need to wear special dive suits designed for surroundings with higher pressure, even though they're not going that deep to the areas where these giants live. But near Antarctica, you can see gigantism way closer to the surface, like giant sponges, sea slugs, sea spiders the size of a dinner plate, worms, and even some enormous single-celled organisms. They all tend to chill in shallower waters. Scientists are not sure why exactly, but they think it could have something to do with oxygen. Giant species use just a little oxygen, and the waters around Antarctica are pretty rich in it, which means there's hardly any limit to these animals growing bigger and bigger. Back to deep-sea creatures. As mentioned, they had to adjust to strong pressure, so they almost don't have any air gaps in their body at all. They're mostly water-based, and since water is incompressible, which means it's not something you can compress, it helps them stay unaffected at such high pressure. But because of all that, If they were to go up towards the surface, they'd probably swell up, maybe even explode. Just look at the blobfish, the one that takes the title of the ugliest animal in the world. It looks normal deep down below the surface, where its natural habitat is. But when it gets up to the surface, where the pressure is 120 times lower, it changes its shape. The blobfish doesn't have a skeleton or muscles, so without high deep sea pressure, it ends up being all floppy and saggy. The dark oceanic depths are not just scary to watch, but to listen to as well. In 1997, scientists were trying to find underwater volcanoes located off the South American coast. During their travels, they recorded one of the loudest noises ever registered. It was pretty weird, too. It was so loud, even sensors from more than 3,000 miles away managed to pick it up. They later called it the bloop. It took them 15 years to conclude the sound came from an ice quake. That's when seismic activity breaks frozen ground. Water at the bottom of the ocean is not always extremely cold. There are hydrothermal vents on the seafloor, and the water that comes out of them can be up to 750 degrees Fahrenheit. Powerful pressure, yep, the same one that would crush you, is something that doesn't allow the water to boil. There are hundreds of animal species that live near deep-sea hydrothermal vents. Some of them, such as tube worms, are not like anything we have seen before. These worms absorb chemicals from vent fluids. That's how they feed bacteria that live in them. And in return, those bacteria give them the carbon the tube worms need to survive. 2/3 of all of the coral species scientists discovered live in dark, deep, and extremely cold parts of the ocean. Some even live in parts that are 3 miles deep. They can survive at low temperatures, such as 28 degrees Fahrenheit. Some of these cold water corals are more than 8,000 years old. They form amazing structures that can rise up to 115 feet tall. The deep is not just a mysterious world of unusual creatures. The landscape under the oceanic surface is magnificent too. The canyons hiding there make even the Grand Canyon seem small. For instance, check out the one located in the Bering Sea, the Jemchug Canyon. Its vertical relief is more than 8,500 feet deep. That's huge. The largest ocean waves are not the ones you can see from the shoreline. They occur under the surface, and they're called internal waves. They take place between two water masses that have different densities. They travel at speeds of thousands of miles per hour and can be 650 feet tall. Hey there, curious history buffs. Have you heard the legend of the ancient race of giants of Nevada? Yes, I'm talking about actual giants that allegedly lived thousands of years ago. Now I know what you're thinking. Giants, really? Well, archaeological finds add fuel to this debate too. And here's where it gets interesting. Lovelock Cave was indeed used as a burial site, and some of the remains found there are much larger than average human bones. The cave is by the Humboldt Sink in western Nevada. It was once part of an enormous lake, which eventually dried up, leaving a number of smaller ones, including the Humboldt Sink. The cave became the home of the Site-Ka tribe. According to the legend, these red-haired giants were so big that they had to be buried in the cave itself. Indeed, later on, archaeologists discovered 8 to 10 foot tall skeletons. This legend started to unfold when a mining engineer named John T. Reed talked to the locals in 1886. Once Reed saw the cave, he knew he was onto something. The news spread soon, but the cave was attracting another type of attention too. The deposits of a fertilizer known as guano were discovered inside the cave. So a mining company began excavating the precious resource in 1911 and soon shipped more than 250 tons of the fertilizer to San Francisco. Unfortunately, some of the human remains and artifacts were neglected and lost in the mining process. This led to an official excavation in 1912 and 1924. After the top layer of guano had been mined, strange objects started to surface. Around the area, the earliest evidence of human habitation dates back about 4,000 years. The Lovelock culture lasted for some 3,000 years, and they left us with 10,000 stunning artifacts. The pits in the cave were like a series of time capsules hidden at different depths. Archaeologists determined the age of each pit by its depth. It turns out that many different groups used the cave for storage over a really long time, and the things they stored there give us a really cool glimpse into their cultures. It's like a giant ancient storage unit full of hidden treasures. What have the researchers found besides the giant bones, you might ask? Some other bodies were mummified using a method similar to the one applied by ancient Egyptians. These remains also had something in common with the bodies discovered as far south as Lake Titicaca. Both mummies had some red hair, yet there are scientists who believe this reddish hue is the result of the interaction with the environment in which the bodies stayed. So, while the story of the red-haired giants may be a wild and intriguing tale, not everyone is convinced. Some experts believe that the bones found in Lovelock Cave are simply the remains of prehistoric animals, like mammoths or sloths. But others insist that there's something more to the story. Other relics, such as finely crafted baskets and exquisite duck decoys made from tule fibers, were also found there. In any case, this cave is worth the attention it gets. By the way, you can still visit this cave today and see the pits of different depths with your own eyes. But let me tell you one thing. It's in a hot, dry, and isolated place. Archaeologists have made another discovery that seems to be straight out of a legend. They think they found the palace of the one and only Odysseus, who was the legendary Greek king of Ithaca and the hero of Homer's epic poem. Move over, Indiana Jones. We've got some real-life adventure happening here from around 1300 BCE. Apparently, this is the only palace mentioned in Homer's epic poems that hasn't been found. The excavations have been made on the Ionian Islands, and the view from the ruins found on the island of Ithaca are exactly as described in the Odyssey, says the professor who led the excavation team. Known to the ancient Romans as Ulysses, the Greek hero took 10 years to return home to Ithaca after the fall of Troy. For many years, Homer's other epic, called the Iliad, which tells the story of the protracted siege of Troy by the Greeks, was regarded as a myth too. But then, in the 1870s, Troy was rediscovered in modern-day Turkey's Çanakkale city. So, if they found Troy, who's to say they couldn't find Odysseus's home? The researchers were following Homer's words as a roadmap. The excavation site has a building complex with 2 levels. It has important finds, such as storerooms and workshops, a complicated drainage system, and fragments of pottery. It also has a well from the 8th century BCE, which is around the time when Odysseus is believed to have been the king. Yet, not everyone is convinced that the team has actually discovered the home of Odysseus. A British researcher named Robert Biddlestone insists that Homer's description of ancient Ithaca isn't very similar to the island that now has its name, and that Odysseus's kingdom was actually on the Isle of Cephalonia. However, Italian archaeologist Adriano La Regina might have a more realistic approach to this debate. He says that whether this find has a connection to Ulysses or not, what's more important is the discovery of this royal palace. Once upon a time, in a land far away, the Klamath Indians spread a legend about the creation of Crater Lake. Okay, maybe this land is not that far away, and it still exists. You can find it in south central Oregon, in the western United States. Anyway, the legend has it that this lake was formed in a vicious battle between 2 volcanoes, Mount Mazama and Mount Shasta. Then the spirits of Earth and the Sky, which are Lao, who ruled the below world, and Skell, the chief of the above world, joined the fight. It turned into a geological drama. During the battle, darkness veiled the land. The fight was over when Mount Mazama collapsed and sent Lao back into the underworld. Then the rain filled the pit and created a lake in the place where the mountain had once stood. Flash forward to our time. Scientists have discovered that Mount Mazama did erupt 7,700 years ago. Artifacts found in the area prove that the legend indeed contains some details about the explosion. The tale says that red-hot rocks were flying through the sky. This happened during the volcanic eruption that caused the mountain to collapse. This created the volcanic caldera, which later on got filled with water. What makes this legend came true story unusual is how long it has existed. According to researchers, these types of verbal stories lose their credibility within 600 to 700 years. That's why the legend about the creation of Crater Lake is so unique. So many generations, for hundreds of years, have been accurately passing down the information. This volcanic crater lake is now in a national park. It's famous for its deep blue color. The water in it is extremely clear. If you visit it today, the water you'll see won't be the same as for someone who will visit the place 250 years later. Because there are no rivers flowing into or out of the lake, the existing water evaporates and the lake gets filled again by rain and snowfall. Basically, every 250 years, the water is replaced. Plus, this lake is almost 2,000 feet deep, which makes it the deepest lake in the United States. Swimming is okay in the lake, but there's only one legal and safe trail to get to the shore. There are other activities, such as fishing and boat tours. Shared human experiences, such as birth, marriage, and aging, may explain why certain tales are shared globally. Similar struggles and obstacles faced by humans around the world generate similar themes in traditional stories about love, parenting, and mortality. So, do you have legends or tales you've heard of from your grandparents? Who knows? Maybe your ancestors too witnessed a cool historical event.
In 2011, scientists from Chile found a weird-looking fossil in Antarctica that looked like a squashed football. Almost 10 years later, the rock just sat on a shelf in Chile's National Museum of Natural History with no specific label. It went by The Thing in the museum because it looked like something from a science fiction movie. When the scientists finally got their hands on the strange fossil, it turned out it was actually a giant softshell egg from around 66 million years ago. This one is more than 11 inches long and 7 inches wide. A regular chicken egg is just 2.5 inches long, and an ostrich egg is almost 6 inches long for comparison. So, The Thing won the title of the biggest softshell egg ever found and the second largest egg of any animal we know of. The only bigger egg that was ever found was that of the extinct Madagascan elephant bird, which is also 1.5 times as tall as Michael Jordan. The bird, not the egg. The Antarctic egg is also special because it's the first fossil ever found in this part of the world. So, whoever left it there must have been one big creature, probably a giant sea turtle that lived long ago, like a mosasaur. This is surprising because most scientists thought these creatures didn't even lay eggs, so this discovery could change what we know about them. The egg is also unique because it has a thin eggshell and no pores, which is totally different from most dinosaur eggs. It actually looks more like the eggs of lizards and snakes, but it came from a giant creature related to these animals. No known dinosaurs or flying reptiles from that time and place were big enough to lay such a huge egg, so it must have been a mosasaur after all. But we can't be 100% sure. Scientists did a lot of work and studied 259 types of living reptiles, like lizards and snakes, and their eggs. From this, they figured out that the mommy who laid the egg was probably at least 23 feet long, not counting her tail. During the late Cretaceous period, this part of Antarctica might have been like a nursery. Paleontologists have found bones of tiny mosasaurs and plesiosaurs in the same area, along with bones from the grown-up ones. Archaeologists in Norway made another cool but literally discovery and found dozens of arrows that had been hidden in ice for 6,000 years. They were melting out of a large ice patch in the high mountains, covering an area of about 45 football fields. In 2014 and 2016, when the summers were extra warm, scientists went to an ice patch called Langfoni to look around. They also found lots of reindeer bones and antlers there. Some of the arrows were whole and some in pieces, along with 5 arrowheads around the melting ice patch. This is more arrows than have been found at any other frozen site in the world. Some of the 68 found arrows date back to the Neolithic period, and the newest ones are from the 14th century of the Common Era. Ice is like the perfect time machine that can preserve whatever ends up there in an almost perfect condition. Langfone became famous as one of the first ice patch sites after a local hiker found a 3,300-year-old leather shoe right next to its edge. Scientists are studying places like this to understand how people use these sites and how the ice patches from Norway to North America changed over time. Now, once upon a time, around 32,000 years ago, to be exact, a squirrel buried some seeds near a river in Siberia. Am I the only one getting the Ice Age vibes? Anyway, these seeds belong to a plant with cute white flowers. Thousands of years later, a group of scientists found these seeds buried deep in the frozen ground, about as far down as a 12-story building is tall. The seeds were surrounded by ice and bones of animals like mammoths, bison, and woolly rhinoceroses. The mature seeds had been damaged, maybe by some squirrel, but some of the younger seeds still had good plant parts inside them. The scientists carefully took those out and put them in small containers to help them grow. And here comes the coolest part. They were able to grow the plants. Their flowers were shaped a little differently from the flowers of the same plant that grows today. After a year, the Ice Age plant even made new seeds. Based on this, the scientists suggested that permafrost could be a depository for an ancient gene pool, and we could find extinct species there and bring them back to life. Scientists on an icebreaker in Antarctica were looking for whales but found something way more unusual. The camera behind the ship, which is as heavy as a car, detected 16 million ice fish nests on the floor of the Weddell Sea. The nests were located about every 10 inches in all directions and covered an area of 93 square miles, which is slightly bigger than the whole of Washington, D.C. The colony even had a distinct border, which was a line in the sand. The scientists were in the area because they were studying a special spot in the ocean where the water was a little warmer than the water around it. In this warmer water, they found tiny animals called zooplankton near the top. When the young ice fish hatch, they swim up to this area to eat the zooplankton before going back down to the seafloor to grow up and have their own offspring. Since there was so much food, it made sense to see ice fish in this warm water. But they didn't expect to find such a huge number of ice fish nests, much more than anyone had ever seen before. New Zealand's Antarctic Heritage Fund found some old photo negatives in a hut in Antarctica. They turned out to be unique images from the Ross Sea Party. It was a famous failed expedition led by Ernest Shackleton. He wanted to become the first person to cross Antarctica by land, from the Weddell Sea to the Ross Sea, passing through the South Pole. But things went wrong when their ship, the Aurora, was blown out to sea. They had to use the hut from another explorer, Captain Robert Falcon Scott. His goal was to be the first person to reach the North Pole, but sadly, he didn't succeed either. The negatives were made of cellulose nitrate and were found stuck together in the small box. The Trust took the negatives back to New Zealand, where they carefully separated them and discovered 22 hidden images. Many of the photos were damaged, but the Trust could still recognize some familiar places around McMurdo Sound, a well-known area in Antarctica. No one knows for sure who took the pictures. In December 2021, some scientists noticed a strange mark on the Larsen Ice Shelf, a giant sheet of ice off the eastern coast of Antarctica. They thought it might be a river flowing under the ice, so they drilled down over 1,600 feet to check it out. They expected to find water, but they didn't expect to see that the water was full of fast-moving creatures called amphipods. The scientists also found that the water in the underground river had unusual layers of currents moving in different directions, which they still don't fully understand. Another surprising thing happened during their research. On December 20th of the same year, a volcano erupted far away in Tonga, and the pressure waves from the eruption were detected all the way down in the ice river in Antarctica. It shows how everything on our planet is connected, even in the most distant places.
You can feel the waves brushing up against you. You wake up and see that you're a giant standing up on 2 feet in the sea. So much water starts dripping down like rain. You're way taller than the Statue of Liberty. You look at your hands and compare them to a small hot dog stand below you. You pick it up and fit it on the palm of your hand before crushing it by accident. Suddenly, you feel a slight sting on your ankle. You look down and see that some people are shoving you away, while most people are running away in fear. Some are taking pictures of you, while others are shouting at you to go away. You take a step to the main road and crush a car with no one inside. The people below you disperse like ants. You walk further into the city and notice there's a huge wall surrounding the rest of the city. You walk towards the city, crushing everything below you on your way. You see other giants stand up on the horizon near the sea and walk toward the barricaded city. Something is calling all of you to go there. Many people stand on the wall and sound the alarm. More people join them to defend the wall. Others evacuate and hide in tiny holes. You notice some of the giants have very odd features and disproportionate limbs. Some are walking on all fours, while some have really long arms that can reach anything. You move a bit when you accidentally almost step on someone. She stands still. You pick her up and put her on your eye level. Both of you are maintaining eye contact. You place her on your shoulder while the other giants walk past you towards the city. They push and shove you while you're standing still. They break through the wall without any effort and ruin the city. For some reason, you snap out of this trance that was drawing you to the city. You turn around and head back to the sea with the woman still on your shoulder. You reach the deepest end of the sea and are still walking. The woman is scared and doesn't know what to do. You place her on a small island and stare at her. She can't see the sun because your head is in the way. For a while, you leave her there while you bask in the sun, trying to make sense of why you're on this planet and what made you want to save this woman. Nighttime comes and you're feeling sleepy. The woman falls asleep under a tree. You stand still while the waves rock you back and forth. Suddenly, the waves get rougher and you feel something moving in the water. You look around, but it's too dark to see what's going on. You quickly pick up the woman and place her on your shoulder. She wakes up. You see the giants swimming and walking towards you, screaming. They start chasing you, trying to catch up with you. You walk as fast as you can, disturbing the water and breaking the ocean floor. You see a cargo ship in front of you and move it aside carefully, not to damage it. But the giants chasing after you don't seem to care about the ship and sink it while trying to get to you. You feel you've reached shallower grounds, and so you start running. You're in a new country that's been leveled by the giants. The buildings are completely flat, and the debris is scattered like small breadcrumbs. In the distance, you can see some more giants waking up by the beach and staring at you. They can smell the human on your shoulder and start chasing you. They're also strange looking and have unusual features. There's no place to hide in the open, so you head to the mountains. Over there, you can hide in the valley near a large waterfall. You notice that your skin starts changing color and you blend in with the environment. Every giant has a unique feature for them to discover. Apparently yours is changing your skin color. The woman on your shoulder is asleep. You look at her and start feeling a sense of sympathy, like looking at a pet. You're not the same as the other giants. You don't crave destruction, but instead want to help humans. You hear some giants walking in the distance. You take a peek and see some new giants that are 3 times bigger than you. They're patrolling around looking for you, and they're getting closer. You accidentally make some noise, and they spot you. They start running after you, and you get up and start running away. You're sprinting through some rough terrain. Some other giants jump in front of you, while the ones chasing you stand behind you. You're surrounded by 5 giants that are all 3 times bigger than you. You place the woman down in a safe place and prepare to protect yourself. They try to tackle you from all sides, but you jump and dodge them. The biggest one gets his hands on you and tries to pin you down, but you slip out and push him away. The rest of them try to catch you, but you move and avoid their grasp. You see a steep cliff and head over there while they're following you. You have your back to the cliff while they're inching their way to you. They jump at you, but you duck down. They fall over the cliff and into the ocean. The biggest one is still there, since it knew what you were up to. One-on-one, you have no chance against him. You can smell the woman trying to run away into a stampede of giants heading your way. Your skin color changes, and you slip through the alpha giant and rush to the woman to save her. The alpha isn't as fast as you, so you can easily outrun it, but the stampede is about to trample her. You jump in front of them and catch the woman. The other giants are startled and angry because you saved the woman. All of the giants know about you now and are out to get you. A few days later, and they seem to be off your tail. You're now in the middle of the desert. The woman is still on your shoulder. She built herself a small shelter where she could sleep without being disturbed. You're trying your best to get out of the desert since anyone can spot you. You're tired and are in need of water. You're barely carrying your feet in the sand. You sit down, trying to keep your head up, but the sun is too intense. You're sweating a lot, and it's dripping down on the woman. She tries to speak with you, but you can't understand what she's saying. You're getting weaker and can't move anymore. It's only noon, so the sun is at its peak. You create a shady spot for the woman with your hand to protect her from the burning sun. The day passes, and the night arrives. You spent all day in the sun and are now in the desert cold. It's freezing. You cup the woman and put your other hand on top to create a warm dome to protect her from the cold wind. It's pitch dark, and you don't know where you're going. You just keep walking and stepping on sand dunes everywhere you go. It's daytime again. You see a large footprint of a giant like no other. Looks like it's even bigger than the huge one by the cliff. You run away as fast as you can, but there's nowhere to hide. Suddenly, you see it standing still. It towers over every other giant you've ever encountered. It's sleeping and gaining energy from the sun. Some giants are accustomed to different climates and terrains. This one is tall, and it can reach the sun for more sunlight. You tiptoe around it, making sure not to wake it, but it can feel everything around it. It's startled and starts chasing you until you reach the ocean. He isn't a fan of water, so he stays on the surface, screaming at you as you swim off.
Most of the ocean is still shrouded in mystery, whether we're talking about dark corners or creatures that are hiding in the depths. But sometimes it gives us a peek into scary things it hides in its cold, dark depths. Like when you hear on the news that there are some deep sea creatures washed ashore after a powerful storm once again. Some just look weird, while others are real monsters that live at depths of more than 3,300 feet. The coldest and deepest parts of the ocean have created one specific phenomenon called gigantism. So, sea spiders, squids, worms, and many other animals, mostly invertebrates, or creatures without backbones, they're all way bigger and scarier than the versions we see in the more shallow areas. In the Pacific depths, you can see a sea sponge as large as a minivan. Or what about the colossal squid that lives in subantarctic waters and is nearly 14 times longer than the arrow squid, a type that mostly lives in New Zealand? Researchers found many of these underwater monsters in the abyssal zone of the ocean. Back in 2021, the researchers showed images of the giant phantom jelly. It was at a depth of 3,200 feet. Its tentacles were 33 feet long. Wow, I wouldn't like to face that one on the beach. It probably eats only small fish and plankton, but it can swim to depths of more than 21,900 feet. And down there, this giant jelly doesn't have enough food. How does it survive then? Scientists haven't figured it out yet. And there are even more questions related to the giant squid, the biggest one ever found. This monster is 43 feet long, with a weight of nearly a ton. Imagine if those tentacles would grab your car, or something like that. They would smash it like it was a toy. There's no light in the abyssal zone. Sun rays just can't penetrate that deep. So there's no algae or underwater plants there. Local animals mostly eat snow. Marine snow is not like the regular one you build a snowman with. It consists of any small flakes or remains that fall from the surface of the ocean. Maybe even some leftovers that animals up there couldn't eat. So it's not much. But apparently, it's enough for very large creatures that hide deep down there, like giant squids. Squids that generally live at such depths don't bother going after their prey. They just wait until the poor animal swims right up to their long tentacles and falls into a trap. It may not be the best method ever, because not many animals will even swim into these dark, cold parts. But it's the method that saves energy. A giant squid eats only 1 ounce of fish daily, which is approximately 45 calories. That's nearly 50 times fewer calories than an average person should eat per day. So when a squid gets 1 fish, it saves it for a couple of days. I hope giant squids won't get the idea to go to the surface and look for food when there's not enough of it in the abyssal zone. And I hope even more that giant Greenland sharks won't get that same idea. You can find them at depths of up to 7,200 feet. They're twice as slow as we usually walk. They swim at a speed of 1.12 feet per second. Their slowness is part of the energy-saving mechanism that creatures down there need to survive. But they can speed up in the form of short bursts when they need to catch prey. But they kinda change their diet from predator to scavenger, considering their environment. There will be more leftovers falling from the surface than animals to go after. Greenland sharks grow just 0.4 inches per year, and they're mostly 20 feet long, which means they live for a very long time, sometimes up to 400 years. They also have a slow metabolism, and that's one of the main factors for their long life, too. Greenland sharks like to spend their time in cold waters. They're adapted to that, since their tissues have specific chemical compounds that prevent the forming of ice crystals all over their body. That means they have some sort of natural antifreeze. So what makes them so big? Scientists are still not sure, but some theories try to explain it. There's this thing called Kleiber's rule that says bigger animals tend to be more efficient. Just take a small fish and compare it to a whale with a mass hundreds of times bigger. The whale has a greater metabolism. It conserves energy more efficiently and loses less of it to the surroundings through heat. Moving on, bigger animals can ingest bigger prey. They're more likely to go through tough issues in their environment or defend themselves from predators going after them. Also, the body gets bigger when temperatures are lower. The Greenland shark is a perfect example. So are giant sea spiders. Sea spiders are generally common, and you find some very small ones at 0.04 inches. But in deeper parts of the Antarctic, they become 3-foot-long giants. They grow so big because the cold water has more oxygen. That way, more of it diffuses into the animal's body, and that allows it to grow bigger. Yeah, both as a creature and a nightmare. And how about this giant tube worm? Researchers found it accidentally while they were exploring the mysteries of the Pacific Ocean floor. They stumbled upon unusual hydrothermal vents. Volcanic heat is a thing that gets them going. As water seeps down through faults or cracks in the rock, these vents change their direction. When the water gets out of the vent, it's rich in different minerals and chemicals. Most animals wouldn't survive being around this toxic soup of chemicals, but not these tube worms. They came as a true surprise, because not only are they not bothered by these toxic vents and the almost boiling temperature of the water, but they developed entire ecosystems there. They're unique because they don't need sunlight to survive. Instead, small bacteria are their main source of energy. That bacteria gets their energy directly from these toxic chemicals. So it's not photosynthesis, but a process called chemosynthesis. And these tube worms don't have mouths. These bacteria live inside them. Strange story, huh? Plus, these scary worms reach up to 8 feet. Giant isopods are no better either. They lurk at the depths of the ocean of 1,640 feet or more below, far away from the sunlight, looking like some monstrous wood lice. They spend most of their time on the seabed, hoping to find some food falling from higher levels of the ocean. Check out their small hooked claws at the ends of their legs. Isopods use them to remain more stable while moving around the ocean floor. Since there's no light, they have long antennae that help them feel their way around. These sensory antennas are about half the length of their body. Giant isopods have pretty big eyes compared to their body size, too. They can grow over 12 inches from head to tail. And these fellas are really patient. Remember how we said animals down there rarely get food? Sometimes they need to wait for years to get a proper meal. That's why their metabolism is amazingly slow.
5 years later.
They can go for 5 years without eating anything. Imagine that. I get hungry just talking about this. In 2006, a biologist did research to compare the differences between the shallows and the deep sea regions. He realized the deep sea mirrors the island rule. First, isolated parts of land develop biodiversity you won't find anywhere else. Second, small-bodied life there grows much bigger when it's isolated, compared to life on large land masses. Resources are limited, but also competition and predators. And we don't know much about these deep-sea creatures. It's too expensive and too complicated to carry out such research, so we'll just wait for more raging storms to show us at least part of the monstrous world cold ocean depths hide. If you could dive right into the mysterious darkness of the ocean depths, who knows what you'd come upon? Legends that are hundreds of years old mention some giant sea monsters hiding deep down below the ocean waves, like the Kraken, the Loch Ness Monster, the Hydra, Leviathan, and so many more. Okay, no one has ever seen such monsters, but there are still weird and unusually big sea spiders, squid, worms, and many other animals that grew way more than we'd expected. Take a look at the colossal squid from sub-Antarctic waters. It's around 14 times longer than the arrow squid that lives near New Zealand. And deep down in the Pacific Ocean, there's a sea sponge as big as a minivan. Oceans contain about 96.5% of all water on our planet. Up to 80% of all life on Earth we've discovered is under the oceanic waves. We haven't explored, mapped, or even seen more than 80% of the ocean. In fact, we've mapped Mars better than we have the ocean bottom. The pressure down there is insane, and it would make you feel like you're holding up almost 50 jumbo jets. And temperatures at such depths are extremely low. Conditions deep below the oceanic surface are harsh, so creatures that live there need to adjust. That's why many of them grew very, very big to survive. Creatures that live in cold, dark depths are so big because of a phenomenon called deep sea gigantism. The deeper you go below the oceanic surface, the less sunlight there is. That's why the temperatures drastically fall. The result of this is increased cell size and longer life of creatures. Also, these creatures don't have as much oxygen as the marine animals that live in shallower parts, and their food sources are minimal. Much of the food they get comes from shallower waters, and only a little bit trickles down to the deeper parts. And when there's not enough food, being large is an advantage. Larger creatures can move farther and faster to find something to eat. Their metabolism works slower. They don't digest the food that fast, so they can store food and conserve energy for hard times when they can't find anything to eat. They don't need to regulate their body temperature either, which also helps them save some energy. which they can then transfer to other body processes. They mature more slowly and later than those living in shallow waters. The majority of fish species that dwell in deep waters live 30 years or even more. Orange roughy fish, on the other hand, live up to 150 years. This fella grows 24 feet in length and weighs up to 1.5 tons. But it grows to be so big for centuries. They start looking for partners when they're 150 years old, and they can also live this long because there are not so many predators at such depths. Also, there are no humans or other things that can disturb them or endanger their existence. At such depths, the environment is pretty stable, so many animals there are like living fossils, because they probably haven't changed in millions of years. The first 650 feet of the ocean's depth are considered to be the open ocean. The majority of the marine life we've discovered lives there, since that's the area the sun can still reach. And then, as you continue going deeper, you reach the twilight zone. It seems like nothing lives there. But at about 820 feet, you see a small oasis of ancient life blooming. For example, there are sea lilies, animals that have been living at such depths unchanged for millions of years. Coelacanths, another living fossil, have been living in the ocean for more than 360 million years. Hagfish haven't changed in a very long time either, for over 300 million years. This creature lives at depths of 5,500 feet. They evolved before the rest of the vertebrates, which is why this is the only living animal without jaws or a spine, even though it still has a skull. Deep-sea creatures can't survive in shallow waters. They've evolved to live in depths under bigger hydrostatic pressure. Humans and other organisms that have internal spaces filled with gas would end up crushed if we could go to such depths. That's why deep-sea divers always need to wear special dive suits designed for surroundings with higher pressure, even though they're not going that deep to the areas where these giants live. But near Antarctica, you can see gigantism way closer to the surface, like giant sponges, sea slugs, sea spiders the size of a dinner plate, worms, and even some enormous single-celled organisms. They all tend to chill in shallower waters. Scientists are not sure why exactly, but they think it could have something to do with oxygen. Giant species use just a little oxygen, and the waters around Antarctica are pretty rich in it, which means there's hardly any limit to these animals growing bigger and bigger. Back to deep-sea creatures. As mentioned, they had to adjust to strong pressure, so they almost don't have any air gaps in their body at all. They're mostly water-based, and since water is incompressible, which means it's not something you can compress, it helps them stay unaffected at such high pressure. But because of all that, if they were to go up towards the surface, they'd probably swell up, maybe even explode. Just look at the blobfish, the one that takes the title of the ugliest animal in the world. It looks normal deep down below the surface, where its natural habitat is. But when it gets up to the surface, where the pressure is 120 times lower, it changes its shape. The blobfish doesn't have a skeleton or muscles, so without high deep-sea pressure, it ends up being all floppy and saggy. The dark oceanic depths are not just scary to watch, but to listen to as well. In 1997, scientists were trying to find underwater volcanoes located off the South American coast. During their travels, they recorded one of the loudest noises ever registered. It was pretty weird, too. It was so loud, even sensors from more than 3,000 miles away managed to pick it up. They later called it the bloop. It took them 15 years to conclude the sound came from an ice quake. That's when seismic activity breaks frozen ground. Water at the bottom of the ocean is not always extremely cold. There are hydrothermal vents on the seafloor, and the water that comes out of them can be up to 750 degrees Fahrenheit. Powerful pressure, yep, the same one that would crush you, is something that doesn't allow the water to boil. There are hundreds of animal species that live near deep-sea hydrothermal vents. Some of them, such as tube worms, are not like anything we have seen before. These worms absorb chemicals from vent fluids. That's how they feed bacteria that live in them. And in return, those bacteria give them the carbon the tube worms need to survive. 2/3 of all of the coral species scientists discovered live in dark, deep, and extremely cold parts of the ocean. Some even live in parts that are 3 miles deep. They can survive at low temperatures, such as 28 degrees Fahrenheit. Some of these cold water corals are more than 8,000 years old. They form amazing structures that can rise up to 115 feet tall. The deep is not just a mysterious world of unusual creatures. The landscape under the oceanic surface is magnificent too. The canyons hiding there make even the Grand Canyon seem small. For instance, check out the one located in the Bering Sea, the Jemchug Canyon. Its vertical relief is more than 8,500 feet deep. That's huge. The largest ocean waves are not the ones you can see from the shoreline. They occur under the surface, and they're called internal waves. They take place between two water masses that have different densities. They travel at speeds of thousands of miles per hour and can be 650 feet tall.
In 2016, 2 researchers were trekking through the forests of Arunachal Pradesh, India, when they literally stumbled upon this camouflaged beauty hidden in the leaves. A local man pointed out the snake, and they quickly realized it wasn't just any average viper. With its unusual pointed snout, similar to a hump-nosed viper, and a stunning orange belly, this snake had them scratching their heads. Back at camp, they took a closer look and knew they'd found something special. DNA tests at the Indian Institute of Science confirmed it. They found a brand new species, now known scientifically as Trimeresurus arunachalensis. But the snake's unique features didn't stop there. The snake's paired reproductive organ was unlike any other viper, and its scale pattern was completely unique. While its closest relative has around 20 rows of scales around the middle of its body, this mysterious snake had only 17. The next species is a record breaker, and it's known as the largest gecko ever discovered, measuring around 2 feet long and being as thick as a man's wrist. The only known specimen of Delcourt's giant gecko is currently in France, but its exact origins are still a little bit of a puzzle. At first, people thought it might be from New Zealand because some local legends spoke of a giant, mysterious lizard that lived in forests. Even though it was a pretty fascinating theory, some recent DNA studies suggest that this nocturnal species is probably from New Caledonia. But as of now, no one can confirm it 100%. In general, sleeper sharks are big, slow-moving creatures that mostly hang out in deep, cold ocean waters. They usually have bulky bodies and a broad, flat head, which helps them blend into the dark sea. But in 2017, was caught at a fishing harbor and collected from a fish market located in Taiwan, and it didn't look like any of its relatives. First off, this 4.4-foot shark had smaller eyes and a tiny second dorsal fin compared to its cousins. It also had more rows of teeth in its upper jaw and fewer in the lower jaw. But the biggest surprise was that it was a pregnant female carrying 33 embryos. This means there are probably more of these sharks hiding out there in the deep ocean. We just haven't found them yet. Meet the pocket shark. It is tiny, just about 5.5 inches long, while most deepwater sharks are around 6.5 feet. But don't let its small size make you underestimate it, because this creature is definitely one of the ocean's coolest secrets. Discovered in 1979 in the deep waters of Chile, this tiny shark is like a real-life spy gadget with its mysterious pockets near its front fins. These pockets are large, measuring about 4% of its body length, and are believed to either glow or secrete pheromones. So, this shark might actually light up to either confuse predators or attract prey in the dark depths. And when I say deep, I mean really deep. It is believed that this creature hangs out over 9,000 feet down, which is roughly the height of 7 Empire State Buildings stacked on top of each other, but inside the ocean. Besides its initial discovery in Chile, it was spotted again in 2010 in the Gulf of Mexico, but it hasn't shown up since. The pocket shark is not the only glowing animal we're talking about today. This inch-long cockroach, scientifically known as Luchihormetica lucae, was actually first collected back in 1939, but only got its moment in the spotlight decades later in 2012. What makes this little buddy so interesting is that it uses bioluminescence, meaning it has spots that light up in the dark. Unlike fireflies that mostly use their glow to find a mate, this cockroach uses its light to mimic a toxic click beetle and scare off predators. Unfortunately, the region in Ecuador where it was found was hit hard by a volcanic eruption, raising fears that this glowing marvel might be a one-of-a-kind discovery. Continuing with tiny creatures, meet Hippocampus minotaur, also known as the bull-neck seahorse. This little seahorse stands out with its wide neck, large head, and small body, which is why it's got the Minotaur nickname. The only known specimens were collected off the coast of Eden, Australia, and no one has ever seen it alive in its natural habitat. So that's why we don't know much about its day-to-day life. Some studies suggest it lives deep underwater, around 325 feet down, which is roughly the equivalent to the height of a 30-story building. It's believed this mysterious seahorse likes to wrap its prehensile tail around corals and might even hide in sand beds. Its yellow-orange color likely helps it blend into coral reefs. So spotting this intriguing creature in the ocean is pretty much like trying to find a needle in a haystack. Next on our list is the Nariño cat. In 1989, a single specimen of this mysterious spotted feline was discovered in Galeras volcano in southern Colombia. This little guy had a short tail with 7 black rings and a black tip, and its fur was absolutely unique, being more reddish than that of its relatives. Understanding that it wasn't an ordinary animal, researchers decided to visit a bunch of museums all over Latin America to find similar felines, but they came up pretty empty-handed. Then, DNA analysis confirmed that it was unlike any other known cat, having split from its closest relatives around 1.9 million years ago. The Bogota sun angel is a hummingbird with a stunning purple color and black flight feathers, plus a bright green chin and crown. For years, we only knew of one specimen that was bought in Bogota, Colombia back in 1909, and that was pretty much it. Nobody knew much more about this beautiful and mysterious bird. But that changed in 2017, when a study decided to analyze its DNA once again. The results suggest that the Bogota sun angel might not be a completely separate species after all. It looks like it is actually a hybrid, meaning it was a mix of hummingbirds from 2 different species. And it's likely that its mother was a long-tailed sylph, which is a gorgeous hummingbird that mostly lives in the Andes in South America. The spotted green pigeon, also known as the Liverpool pigeon, is like the unicorn of the bird world. It was first described in 1783 by an English physician named John Latham, who saw it once and that's it. Since then, no one has ever doubted that it was a pigeon, and many researchers were convinced it was a distinct species. But recent DNA studies revealed that this bird could actually be closely related to the famous dodo. You know, that chubby, flightless bird from Mauritius that looked like a giant pigeon with a quirky beak. Anyway, the Liverpool pigeon is about 13 inches long and has a unique look with yellow spotted feathers. Unlike its ground-loving cousin, the Nicobar pigeon, the spotted green pigeon was likely more of a tree hugger, feasting on fruits up in the branches. Today, if you want to see this rare bird, you'll have to visit the World Museum in Liverpool, where the only known specimen resides. While you're in England, make sure to swing by London and check out the Natural History Museum. There, you will find the only specimen of a flying fox known scientifically as Pteropus bruneus. Flying foxes are usually some of the largest bats in the world. Their body length, I mean their size excluding their wings, can be around 16 inches. But this special bat, discovered in 1874 at Percy Island, is more like a mini version of its cousins, measuring 8.3 inches from head to toe. So even though it hasn't been spotted in the wild for a while, I wouldn't worry too much if you happen to come across it.
Imagine you are walking to your car in the morning, but there is a problem. Your vehicle is not sitting neatly by the side of the road. Its rear end is sticking out of a gaping hole. This is what happened to a Queens resident, New York, back in 2020. A sinkhole had swallowed his SUV overnight. Events like this are nothing out of the ordinary in many parts of the globe. But sometimes, sinkholes can hide unspoken beauty inside them. In East Asia, a recent find stunned the scientific community. Cave explorers came across a colossal sinkhole that concealed an ancient forest. It is located in a province, Guangxi Zhuang, close to the north of Vietnam, the Lê County, where researchers discovered the hidden forest is already famous worldwide for sinkholes. This one brings the number to 30. They are scattered over an area the size of 3 Gibraltars. This is just a tenth of the total number of sinkholes in the whole country. The name Tiankeng for these large holes in Earth's surface translates as sky holes or heavenly pits. The dimensions of the new sinkhole are impressive. It is over 1,000 feet long, and it's pretty deep too. You could fit the Great Pyramid of Giza 1.5 times inside it. The sinkhole's total volume matches that of 2,000 Olympic swimming pools. The exploration team had to hike for hours to reach the bottom. It was all worth it in the end. They discovered a pristine underground forest that had no trace of human activity. Scientists estimate that the plants date back to the time of the dinosaurs. The foliage reached to the explorers' shoulders. Some trees were 2 times taller than the Hollywood sign. This discovery was amazing, but not entirely unexpected. Geologists were familiar with this type of landscape. In this part of East Asia, karst topography is pretty common. The word is Slavic in origin. Since the late 19th century, geologists have been using it to describe barren limestone regions. This type of landscape features fissures in the ground, caves, underground streams, and, of course, sinkholes. Karst forms in parts of the world with heavy rainfall. The water dissolves materials such as limestone or dolomite. This creates a scenery that many people describe as wild beauty. Karst terrains have a practical purpose as well. They are ideal for storing water that humans can drink. Around 700 million people around the world use these karst aquifers as their primary water source. In the United States alone, 40% of the groundwater used for drinking comes from them. Springs of Florida and the Mammoth Cave in Kentucky are just some of the most famous karst areas. Geologists classify around 1/5 of the U.S. land surface as karst. This type of terrain exists on other continents as well, in the Caribbean, Europe, Australia, and Asia. Due to local differences in climate and geology, karst doesn't appear the same everywhere. In the Spanish province of Malaga, the landscape consists of barren rock. This is what the karst regions of Italy, Slovenia, and Montenegro also look like. In East Asia, the landscape over the karst is green. This is because of the humid tropical climate. Sinkholes and cave entrances are usually hidden behind lush vegetation. The region's unique appearance got it inscribed on the UNESCO's World Heritage List in 2007. The world's second most populous country is home to 2/3 of the planet's natural occurring sinkholes, Tiankengs. They start to form when rainwater seeps into cracks in the limestone. Over time, the gaps widen as more and more material is washed away. At one point, the ground above the limestone becomes unstable. The end result is the collapse of the surface layer. This happens suddenly and without prior warning signs. Once a hole forms in the ground, water starts filling it up. Another way for a sinkhole to form is the existence of an underground cave. Its roof can collapse. The shape of such sinkholes resembles a funnel. It is wider at the opening on the top and narrower near the bottom of the pool. The most famous of these sinkholes are cenotes. They occur naturally on the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. The region is home to more than 2,000 cenotes. They are all former caves whose roofs had collapsed at some point in time, and they are filled with fresh water. The local people have been using them as water sources for thousands of years. The ancient Mayas gave them mystical symbolism. For them, the cenotes were passageways to the other world. In reality, they are just a feature of karst terrain. sinkholes that form in regions with abundant rainfall and limestone beneath the surface soil. The depth of a sinkhole can vary significantly. The smallest are barely 3 feet deep. When it fills up with water, it turns into a pond. A large lake can form in the place of a large sinkhole. One example is the Red Lake in Croatia. The most impressive thing about it are the steep cliffs that rise above the lake. They are nearly 800 feet tall. The world's biggest and deepest sinkhole, Zhaoshai Tiankeng, lies in the vicinity of the Yangtze River. The outside world discovered it only in 1994. The hole is so deep that you could stack up 7 statues of Liberty inside it. During the rainy season, a waterfall cascades from the pit's mouth into a cave system at the bottom. But not all sinkholes fill up with water. This was the case with the newly discovered giant sinkhole in Asia. It developed its own ecosystem. The high humidity and low temperature inside it were perfect for plant life to thrive. The very bottom of the hole is connected to an underground water flow. Scientists discovered 72 species of rare wild plants in the area. They are in danger of disappearing on the surface. But inside the sinkhole, they have found the perfect conditions for growth. The enormous opening in the ground is essentially a wildlife refuge. This was confirmed in 2021. That's when biologists discovered 2 species in the Yunnan province that they previously thought had gone extinct. Who knows what other animal and plant species are still hiding in there? Exploring these underground cave systems can be quite dangerous. They are often home to venomous snakes and mosquitoes. Even descending into a sinkhole is perilous. The cliffs are steep and stones are often very sharp. That's why the exploration of sinkholes in Asia is going slower than research would like. The sinkholes I've mentioned so far have all formed naturally. Erosion is the main process behind their creation. But the ground can also open because of human activity. Everything from a construction site to a leaking sewer pipe can cause the earth to give way. Sinkholes in urban areas pose a risk to infrastructure. One of the most famous examples of this happened in Japan in 2016. A busy street in downtown Fukuoka collapsed near the main train station. The sinkhole severed power lines and pipes that lay underground. Luckily, no one was injured. The diligent Japanese engineers repaired the damaged road section in just 48 hours. The biggest issue with sinkholes is that you never know when and where they are going to open. The best tool that geologists have for detecting underground cavities is ground-penetrating radar, GPR. It resembles a land mower. The operator goes up and down a troubled area to scan the ground underneath. The radar sends out impulses that detect any contrast between different materials. It feeds back this info in the form of a 2D or a 3D image. Once engineers detect a potential sinkhole, they use different techniques to stabilize the ground above it. The simplest method is called grouting. It involves filling the hole so it won't collapse. The most common materials are polyurethane foam and cement. The alternative is to lift a structure above the sinkhole. This technique is called underpinning. Workers drive steel rods into the load-bearing deeper layer of soil. This is the same construction method engineers use to erect stilt houses above the waterline.
Ooh, the ground below your feet is rumbling. You hear a scary roar in the distance and think to yourself, okay, this is it. This is how I go. A large Tyrannosaurus Rex is heading your way. Its massive jaws wide open, the creature is ready to swallow you whole. But only until a large ape springs out of nowhere and blocks its path. That's the Gigantopithecus. It's an actual King Kong that disappeared around 100,000 years ago. While the two creatures are trying to stare each other down, you quietly sneak off to hide behind the bushes. The animals are out in the open plain. That's where the T-Rex has a home advantage. Tyrannosaurus Rex means king of the tyrant lizards, and the creature deserves its name. This giant dino stood around 12 feet tall. It was also as long as a school bus, stretching 40 feet from nose to tail. It lived around 68 million years ago in North America. Thanks to the shape of its skull, the T-Rex probably had good vision. But scientists claim that the animal mostly relied on its strong sense of smell when it hunted for food. The huge ape bangs on its chest and lets out a terrifying low growl. The Gigantopithecus is the largest primate that has ever been discovered. It lived in the tropical jungles of southern China and some areas in Thailand. When scientists discovered its jawbones, they noticed that the animal's teeth were meant to grind and chew. At the same time, the T-Rex had 60 razor-sharp serrated teeth, each about 8 inches long. Anyway, a 12-foot-tall dinosaur and a 10-foot-tall ape are standing facing each other. The fight is about to begin. The T-Rex charges toward the ape. Its speed isn't really high, which gives its opponent enough time to duck and roll out of the way. Good for the Gigantopithecus. It wouldn't be a pleasant experience to be at the receiving end of the T-Rex's bite. The dino had a bite force of at least 6 tons. And no wonder, with such powerful jaw muscles. The T-Rex wasn't the fastest dino out there. It could only move at the average speed of 12 miles per hour. But the creature was flexible and rather smart. By the time the ape is back on its feet, the T-Rex is already charging at it. But the large ape manages to swing a punch at its opponent. Its incredible force almost knocks the dino out. At least, it's enough to make the T-Rex see some spinning stars flying around its head. The animal's tiny arms aren't long enough to respond in kind. If this was an arm wrestling match, the ape would surely win without breaking a sweat. Actually, almost any animal could probably win hands down in an arm wrestling match against a T-Rex. But the dino hasn't been skipping leg day, that's for sure. Its massive limbs could probably squish a car, if there had been cars at that time. The ape sprints toward the fallen dinosaur, but gets smacked right in its face with the T-Rex's enormous tail. The ape flies upward. You have to throw your head back to watch its flight. And still, the animal manages to avoid any damage thanks to its powerful arms. The T-Rex has already risen and is now racing towards the Gigantopithecus. With nowhere to hide, the ape uses its long arms to hold the T-Rex's mouth closed. Meanwhile, its opponent does its best to open its jaws. Soon, the dinosaur succeeds. It sinks its teeth into the ape's thigh and tries to shake the animal like a rattle. But the ape isn't that easy to defeat. It begins pounding on the dino's skull while keeping the T-Rex's mouth from moving. Now, keep in mind that this ape was at least 3 times bigger than the modern-day gorilla and weighed more than 1,000 pounds. And still, nothing seems to be helping. The ape is getting weaker. It's losing its strength. The animal then attempts to get rid of the dino's jaws on his thigh. It musters up all its energy and opens the T-Rex's mouth. After that, the ape quickly frees its leg from the teeth prison and breaks free. Without wasting any time, the creature throws several punches at the T-Rex, knocking it to the ground. Soon, the dino can barely stand straight without falling over. It attempts to run away and have a rest, but the ape is too persistent. It isn't backing down. The T-Rex weighed between 6 and 8 tons, and the bigger the animal is, the harder it goes down. But throwing all those punches is wearing the ape down. It starts to slow down. This buys the dino some time to recover. Once ready, it pushes the ape onto the ground with its massive head and tries to stomp the opponent. The ape dodges and rolls out of the way. It even manages to grab one of the T-Rex's legs and flip the dino over. But the ape's arms have become weaker after the struggle. The T-Rex manages to get up and bites down on the ape's shoulder. This tires the Gigantopithecus even more. Without being able to use its arms, there isn't much the animal can actually do. It seems the T-Rex has won this round. You can use this small break to get away from the giant animals. You're now in the thick tropical jungle, and the humidity there is turning your hair into an afro. Suddenly, you see something large and dark lurking behind the trees. Out comes the Gigantopithecus. Just great. Not again. This time, the creature seems to be ready for whatever comes its way. You see the trees in the distance move like ripples on a lake. The T-Rex pops out. It also looks ready for action. all you can think about is, why can't I just have a normal vacation? So you find yourself a nice comfy spot to get out of the way. Even though the Gigantopithecus was a native of the tropical jungle, studies showed this creature didn't climb trees. The ape was too large and heavy to climb trunks and swing from branch to branch. Instead, it gathered food from the ground and was tall enough to pick fruit from trees, which was its main diet. Scientists know for sure that the Gigantopithecus went extinct during the Ice Age. Climate change wiped out all of its favorite foods, and for some reason, this species didn't take to eating greenery, such as grass and leaves. The T-Rex was definitely designed to eat meat. Its diet consists of basically anything it could get its tiny hands on. The dino hunted animals and other dinosaurs, but it wasn't above scavenging. Oh look, they're at it again. But this time, it's the ape that has a strong home advantage. Even though it can't technically climb trees, it can easily squeeze through bushes. It also knows the jungle like the back of its enormous head. And the T-Rex has troubles navigating through the dense jungle. It keeps bumping into trees. The T-Rex looks lost. It can't seem to find the ape. It moves to grab a bite of whatever seems to be its opponent, but it's just a large bush. The dino gets angry and shakes it until only several branches and twigs are left. Meanwhile, the ape appears out of nowhere and throws a powerful punch. The T-Rex loses its balance and topples over. It tries to bite the ape, but misses. The ape keeps hitting the dinosaur. The T-Rex manages to swing its tail and sends its opponent into a tree, breaking the trunk. Some fruit drop onto the ape's head. The animal grabs them and throws at the dino, trying to confuse it. But it's like throwing pebbles at a rock. The ape takes hold of a tree trunk and uses it as a shield to avoid tail swings directed at it. As soon as the trunk breaks, the ape catapults itself on top of the T-Rex, trying to wrestle the creature to the ground. The king of the lizards is crushed down by the ape's weight and can't find a way to free itself. It tries to get out of the opponent's grip several times. Once the dino succeeds, it scurries away out of the jungle. The big ape is the winner. Victorious, it bangs on its chest. Now, how are you supposed to get out of here? So how come the world is still talking about a statue that only existed for a mere 54 years over 2,000 years ago? What made this impressive ancient construction so remarkable that we're still discussing it? I'm talking about the Colossus of Rhodes, of course. It's considered to be one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, along with the Great Pyramid of Giza or the Gardens of Babylon. There are a lot of mysteries surrounding this ancient statue, but let's look at some of the facts first, shall we? What we do know is that the local Rhodians decided to start a massive project once a Macedonian siege over their island was over. In other words, it was their way of honoring the higher powers for their victory. Using a lot of material left behind by the Macedonians, they started the construction of the Colossus, which is estimated to have taken about 12 years. Most contemporary descriptions of the sculpture agree that it stood about 105 feet tall. Now, just to compare, that's about the size of the Statue of Liberty today, which is 151 feet tall. It may not seem like a lot. I mean, Lady Liberty is currently ranked as the 52nd tallest statue in the world. The champion here would be the Statue of Unity in India, standing proud at an astonishing 597 feet. But for ancient times, that was quite an accomplishment. But is the similar height the only connection between the Colossus of Rhodes and the Statue of Liberty? Not really. We do know that they both also refer to Lady Liberty as the modern Colossus, since both statues were constructed as a symbol of liberation. There's even a plaque placed inside the pedestal of the New York statue, inscribed with the first verse of the sonnet, "The New Colossus," not like the brazen giant of Greek fame. To build this massive Colossus statue, they sure needed a lot of bronze. Some ancient records even recount that the construction required 27 to 29,000 pounds of bronze. Even for modern times, this is a lot, but back then, they even called it an operation that involved the bronze industry of the entire world. The man tasked with bringing the statue to life was Shars of Lindos, a local Greek sculptor. The whole construction took place from 294 to 282 BCE, but unfortunately, Shars never got to see the end result. We don't know for sure why that happened, but some records claim constructing the Colossus of Rhodes may have led him to complete bankruptcy, since he failed to accurately estimate the cost for the massive statue. Anyway, we still don't know for sure how it was possible to build a statue this big back in those days. They had none of the equipment we have today, like excavators or elevators. Some old records said that they had to invent a completely new, custom method to build it. It all happened on the location, put together piece by piece. They supposedly split the statue into many different sections, and the first one to be constructed was the feet. Once each section was done, huge mounds of earth were placed around it, so they could continue working on the next section above. However, these records were made more than 100 years after the Colossus was finished, so there's little we can say about the accuracy of this information. In all those 12 years, the local Greeks worked around the clock to build the Colossus of Rhodes. They started with a white marble base that they placed at the statue's feet. They then continued with some sort of an iron skeleton, to which they attached the bronze plates. Why did they choose bronze, though? Well, that was more for practical reasons, since bronze is stronger than iron and it can also sustain extreme weather conditions. More so, if you think about it, the statue was located pretty close to the sea, so the air surrounding it would have been pretty salty. That's why they needed to make it out of quite sturdy material. And what about the location? Well, that's something that has been up for debate for a long time. Researchers initially believed that the statue stood with each leg on either side of the Mandrake Harbor, one of many in the city of Rhodes, basically straddling its entrance. As imposing as that may sound, it was likely not the case. First of all, that would have meant the harbor would have to have been closed for the whole duration of the construction, which doesn't seem to match all the other records. More so, after the statue had fallen, it would have probably blocked the entirety of the harbor, which again doesn't seem to be mentioned anywhere. Most recent depictions say that it most likely stood either on the eastern side of the Mandrake Harbor or maybe even further inland. So, what happened to this impressive structure? Is there really nothing left of it to this day? And why did it survive for only 54 years, since it took so long to build and it was so important for locals? Well, as admired and valued as it was to the Greeks, an earthquake took the Colossus of Rhodes away from them. The story goes that because of the movement of the earth beneath it, the statue snapped at its knees and was completely laid on the ground. Nonetheless, the statue still continued to be admired for centuries. The Rhodians refused to rebuild it as they considered it a sign and did not dare intervene with destiny. By the middle of the 7th century, they had taken away what was left of the statue completely. Legend says it took about 900 camels to carry all the bronze away from the location. And what about the looks of the statue? This is also one aspect that is still shrouded in mystery. Even though it was a symbol of the locals' pride in maintaining their independence, they did not use the depiction of the statue for any of the coins they made, even though that was kind of customary. Other art historians do think, however, that the Colossus was similar to other depictions of the same mythological creature, a male figure that had rays of light rising from its head. The position of its hands is also still up for debate. Some say it might have even been holding a torch. We don't know if his hands were pointed straight down or whether the right arm was raised, like in similar representations in Greek mythology. The original might not be here for us to admire anymore, but there are some plans out there to rebuild it. A group of European architects intends to build a 21st century version of the ancient statue. This new construction is planned to stretch 500 feet tall. It should serve as a cultural center combined with a lighthouse. To make sure it won't have the same destiny as its ancient ancestor, these designers intend to use a lot of technology available today. Firstly, they plan to cover the whole exterior of the modern Colossus with solar panels so that the enormous building has enough electricity. They also intend to use modern resources to make sure earthquakes and wind forces won't affect the massive structure yet again. To do that, they plan to build the statue as a tripod structure, made from its 2 legs and a third pillar of support, constructed from the sash draped over the statue's arm and touching the ground. They also plan to place heavy steel support around the base for counterbalance. They even thought of a suspension system that would permit the statue to rock back and forth, making it a bit more flexible and able to resist all the various weather conditions. The manufacturer's suggested retail price on this project is quite high though, estimated at around $283 million. Supporters of the modern Colossus are optimistic as they are certain they can raise that impressive amount of cash through crowdfunding and private investments.
Hey there! Grab your popcorn and hot dogs. This is gearing up to be the spectacle of the century. We'll compare ancient water monsters in several categories, then pit them against each other in a duel to see which one's the true queen of the water. The contender on the left needs no introduction. The Alpha, the boss, the legend that lived on our planet 3.6 million years ago. She's still the hero of myths and legends and a nightmare for fishermen around the world. Make some noise for Meg the Megalodon! In the right corner, Sarcosuchus, aka Sarky. She's the ancestor of today's crocodiles and a real grandma compared to Meg. She lived about 120 million years ago and saw the dinosaurs come and go. They were even her breakfast sometimes. She lived in what is now the Sahara, but there was no desert then, and the world looked totally different. Although this crocodile isn't as famous as Meg, she's still not afraid to go up against the giant shark. Round 1. Size. Since the only remains of the megalodon are teeth and vertebrae, her true size remains a mystery. But if we compare her remains to the bodies of modern sharks, we get the incredible size of 50 feet. That's like 1.5 buses. But I bet you wouldn't want to take a ride on that kind of transport. Meg's fin alone is the size of an adult. This ancient monster remains the largest shark that ever existed. The largest white shark ever measured was 17 feet long. That's less than half. Now Sarky's turn. Until recently, we only had the teeth of this ancient crocodile to go on. But then, scientists discovered some new remains, and they were able to figure out just how big she really was. Sarky was as long as a limousine, about 30 feet. The largest crocodile ever measured was a saltwater crocodile, only 20 feet. Sarky's head was 5 feet long. That's almost a whole person. And her mouth had a special mace-shaped tip. But even with that, she's still only half the length of Meg. So the ancient shark wins this round, and the first point goes to Meg, 1-0. The next category is weight. Let's start with the contender in the right corner. The largest modern crocodiles weigh about a ton. Sarky made it all the way up to 4 tons. That's like 2 helicopters heavy. Her weight and size allowed Sarky to be queen of the ancient river. But she's pretty much a toothpick compared to Meg. You'd need a pretty hefty set of bathroom scales to weigh the contender in the left corner. Once fully grown, Meg weighed between 30 to 60 tons. That's a lot. A cargo helicopter can lift 9 tons. It would take around 5 of them to lift Meg safely. The heaviest shark nowadays, the white shark, only 3,500 pounds. Meg wins the second round, and the giant shark gets another point, 2-0. Moving on, the next category is agility. We can assume that Sarky could reach the same speed as most modern crocodiles. In the water, we're looking at up to 20 miles per hour. That's about 3 times faster than the fastest human swimmer. Her speed mostly comes from her long and muscly tail. It's one of the strongest muscles in her body and gives her speed and agility. But Sarky wasn't limited to the water world. She liked to move around on land too. Like the big modern crocodiles, she could probably run at speeds up to 20 miles per hour. This allowed her to go after other animals, not just fish. She definitely had a soft spot for large lizards and even small dinosaurs. So what about Meg? It's hard to move such a massive muscle machine. Her maximum speed was around 10 miles per hour. That allowed her to catch up with whales and smaller fish. She felt pretty good about herself, but 10 miles per hour is not really that fast. Modern white sharks can reach 35 miles per hour. That's 3 times faster than Meg. So our giant shark was more like a truck than a Ferrari. Slow to accelerate, slow to brake, and extremely bad at turning. If Meg wanted to run the 100 meters, it'd probably take her about 50 seconds. The human world record is just under 47 seconds, but that's in a pool where you have to pull a U-turn halfway. There's no way Meg could do that. Looks like Meg lost a bit of ground to the agile crocodile, and our river monster is finally up on the board, 2-1 in favor of Meg. Okay, next round. How about we call it eating tools? Of course, Meg's main tool is her teeth. Megalodon means big tooth. She had the largest teeth ever recorded. 5 rows of teeth, 250 in total. The largest ones were over 7 inches long, and you better believe they were all razor sharp. That's definitely enough to bite through a tough leather couch, know what I mean? So if you ever saw Meg smile at you, well, that's probably the last smile you'll ever see. And her jaw's incredible. You could drive a car into her mouth, or lie down in it with room to spare. Her bite force was so strong that it could easily bend metal. Whales, dolphins, fish, fishing boats, crunch, munch, gone. Sarki's teeth are a bit different, but no less awesome and powerful than the biggest shark of all time. She had 70 teeth up top and 62 down on the bottom. Their shape allowed Sarki to grab her lunch and never let go. Crocodiles in general have one of the strongest bites of any species, and it's their main superpower. But don't forget about that tail. Sarki's was so heavy and strong, it'd be like getting hit by a motorbike. That kind of versatility earns Sarki 1 more point. We're all tied up at 2. Bonus round. Audience sympathy prize. If Meg were around today, she'd definitely live in Hollywood, making movies, TV shows, commercials, and she always seems to play the villain. Well, she's also the hero of countless scary stories told by fishermen around the world. Many people even believe that she's still swimming about down there, somewhere, hiding from us in deep waters, like the Mariana Trench. But Meg needs a lot of food to feed such a large body. She'd have to keep coming up to the surface to find enough to eat. So much for that myth. And Sarki? She's more of an indie artist, not really the Hollywood type. But like all crocodiles, she puts fear into anyone who lives near a river. Crocodiles love that late-night snack, so a lot of people are even afraid to leave their homes after sunset. And locals sometimes find crocodiles in their backyards. Imagine seeing Sarki laid out on your brand new deck. Let's give Sarki this round, and she's taken the lead, 3-2. Okay, the final round is all about that X factor, combat skills. Meg still holds the crown for the most dangerous you'd ever come across in open water. And it's mostly thanks to her intelligence and strategy. We can figure out Meg's tactics by looking at other animals from that time. Many ancient whale bones have scratches from Meg's teeth. It seems like she knew where the weakest points of various animals were located, so she knew where to nibble at first. She seemed to enjoy a little fin appetizer before each meal. Sometimes she'd give them a nudge first. They weren't swimming away after that kind of impact. Then it's main course time. Sarki may seem weaker, but she's full of surprises. She's fast and agile, so she could easily catch up with even the fastest mammals that had come to get a little drink of river water. And when she bites, she never lets go. But scientists say Sarki probably couldn't do all those awesome wrestling moves that today's crocodiles love to do. She couldn't roll around, holding her lunch in her teeth. The structure of her head simply didn't allow her to do that. But even so, she pretty much always came out on top. Not too many crocodiles go hungry. Sarky had a good round, but we have to give this one to Meg. She's just too awesome. And we're all tied up again, 3-3. Well, it's time for the big face-to-face matchup. The arena, the place where the mighty river meets the vast ocean. Sarky's great at hiding and sneaking up on people, and so she gets the first go. Meg tries to dodge, but the ancient crocodile already found a tasty fin. Unfortunately, Sarky's teeth are a little too short to cause even the slightest harm to big old Meg. She breaks free and pushes the crocodile with her powerful body. Sarky looks stunned, and Meg sees her chance to make a U-turn and end it. She gathers speed and... oh, it's all over with a single bite. KO. Meg has defended her title and remains the undisputed champion of the world. Who will challenge her next?